call the roll.
Ms. Drummond.
Present.
Mr. Trainee is excused until a few more minutes. He's stuck in traffic. Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Ms. Osiander. Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Starr.
Here.
Mr. Trombley.
Here.
Ms. Johnston is excused. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn is joining us on the phone. Mr. Birch.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Birch, would you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have some minutes before us.
Second.
Is there discussion about the minutes? Is there objection to approval of the minutes? Seeing no objection, the minutes were approved unanimously. Mr. Mayor, do you have a report for us tonight?
No report today, Madam Chair.
My only report is that I had a conversation with a school board president who invited us to take part in a training, a two-day training on May 24th and 25th on reforming school districts. It's an all-day event with a small fee attached. So if anybody's interested in that, please let the clerk or I know. Starting at your end, Mr. Birch, do you have any committee report to give?
No committee reports, thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
No report.
Starr?
We're going to have to cancel the meeting of May 19th. I'm going to be out of town, so we'll just pick up another meeting in June for the Budget and Finance Committee.
Mr. Hall?
No report.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reemphasize that at the audit committee, the last audit committee meeting we had regarding the Police and Fire Medical Trust audit findings, we came to an agreement that we were going to establish an ad hoc committee or subcommittee and have members from the Police and Fire Medical Trust and members from the administration and, of course, the committee to evaluate some options that were discussed during that meeting. And I plan to set up the first meeting sometime within the next 2 weeks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Honeman?
We have a Public Safety Committee meeting is scheduled tomorrow, Wednesday at noon at room 155, conference room at City Hall, Municipal Hill Building. Also, Wednesday night, tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Anchorage School District Headquarters on Boniface, we have our 14th Citizen Police Academy session. Class 11-1 will be graduating, and of course the public is welcome to attend. A smaller group than we've had over the past years, but actually a very good, well-attended group and very eager group to continue perhaps volunteering at the Anchorage Police Department in some way, capacity to help them serve their community, which is good. And then lastly, I was just recently in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a conference and found that I was literally within an hour or so drive of commissioning this Friday and Saturday of USS Anchorage, and unfortunately not able to work it out because of these other conflicts to be there, but love to have been. I think the last USS Anchorage was in service, I think we read somewhere around 37 or 38 years, and hopefully we'll have 38 more good years of the new boat. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. I have no committee report. I just do want to express my concerns that the committee assigned to address the redistricting plan made a presentation to the Alaska Redistricting Board presenting itself as a plan approved by the entire Assembly, and I heard about this after the fact and had no input. Thank you.
I'd like to respond and clarify if anybody has any questions or concerns. I did identify myself. I spoke, and did Mr. Baker and Ms. Grinstein before the Redistricting Board. At the time, I identified myself as chair of the Assembly. I basically reflected what I had heard from members of the Assembly as concerns. Specifically, I stated that we wanted to keep and protect our neighborhoods in Anchorage. We had some concerns with the inclusion on the draft-approved plans of South Anchorage with Kenai districts. I said we strongly objected to breaking up any districts or communities in northeast Anchorage. I stressed that Muldoon was a rapidly growing area and strongly objected to being in multiple legislative districts. I also stated that the historic break in Peters Creek, where that area was aligned with Mat-Su, was not objectionable. I truly think that, and still believe, that I said nothing that was controversial or in any way against any comment that I've heard from any assembly member. I basically thought I reflected what I heard in the community. I never said this was an official view of the assembly. So my apologies if that caused some concern, and I'd be happy to continue to, if you've got a specific item that you object to, I'll be happy to write in it and send that into the redistricting board too. Thank you. Mr. Birch, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just personally want to thank you for representing the Assembly and in participating in that hearing. I was not able to attend. I did attend the first hearing that you and I both participated in, and I did testify on my behalf, on behalf of my constituents in South Anchorage, more specifically to concerns regarding some of the division and the misalignment and not following and being aligned with some of the geographic features that really show up and for instance, major roads like the Seward Highway and stuff. And I think those comments were well received and appreciated. And I would certainly encourage anybody on the Assembly that has an issue or you know, some suggestions or encouragement that the public process is certainly receptive to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And as you know, our Chief of Staff, Larry Baker, testified on behalf of the administration and also reflected the comments that we heard from the community and from Assembly members. The four main points were that we wanted to have a hard boundary to the south, as you mentioned, so that we weren't aligned with Kenai, and then push our 16.44 legislative seats to the north because we have much more commonality with the Mat-Su borough, given that there's about 15,000 commuters a day. Our military bases, a lot of the residents live both in Eagle River, Chugiak, and Mat-Su. The fact that we wanted to reflect community council boundaries as much as possible. In the original draft, both drafts by the redistricting board did not, at least within Anchorage, reflect as appropriately the community council boundaries, which our version, I think, got much closer to true community council representation. And then finally, as you mentioned, the geographic features that are the typical dividing lines within Anchorage. I think the version that we submitted came much truer to our traditional boundaries. So, again, I think we reflected what we heard from our constituents and from the Assembly as well.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, I neglected to call on you. Did you have any committee report to give?
Well, Madam Chair, you sat in the same important meeting I sat in on last week, and I think it's fair to say that we were not entirely enamored in the level of progress that we have seen in the intervening months since we last meeting. So we'll work with you and the responsibilities of that committee, and I'll be turning it over to the council. While the conversation gets ready to expect our next enterprise activity committee, will likely focus on the
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. The addendum is before us.
Second.
Is there objection to including the laid on the table items with that motion?
No, there is not.
All right, and there is one additional one that is not listed on the paper before you, and that's the Mr. Trombley 2011-55 It's another version of the ID alcohol ordinance, if you all have that. Is there you don't? Oh, Mr. Flynn, is there a way you can access documents where you are?
I can. It's not on the agenda at this time. I don't have an email copy.
Okay. Ms. Tucker, could you email Mr. Flynn the laid on the table item? Thank you. She's sending it to you, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right. Is there objection to incorporation of the addendum and the laid-on-the-table items into the agenda? Seeing no objection, those items are incorporated. I'll go ahead and read them for the record. 9B5 AR 137 is a resolution of the Assembly opposing the designation of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration 3,016 square miles of Upper Cook Inlet and Ketchimek Bay as critical habitat for beluga whales. B6 is AR 138. It's a resolution appropriating $24,387 from the State of Alaska Department of Health and Human Services as a supplemental grant to the State Direct and Federal Pass-Through Grant Fund to provide the Women, Infant, and Children Supplemental Nutrition Services in the Department of Health and Human Services, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 291. B7 is AR 139, a resolution appropriating $24,000 from the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Service as a supplemental grant to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grant Fund 231 for the Aging and Disability Resource Center in the Department of Health and Human Services, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 292. 9B8 is AR 141. It's a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $45,000 as a restricted contribution from the Anchorage Women's Club and $50,000 of interest earnings from the Historic Preservation Fund 740 to the Historic Preservation Fund in support of the Anchorage Pioneer Schoolhouse Restoration Project Community Development Program, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 295. In the C section of our agenda, bid awards, C1, Assembly Memorandum AM 287. It's a recommendation of award to S.R. Bales Construction Incorporated for Fire Station 6 replacement, Public Works Department, Maintenance and Operations Division for $4,757,000. Item C2 is Assembly Memorandum 288. It's a recommendation of award to Roger Hickle Contracting Incorporated for the 2011 Merrillfield Improvements Rehab Taxiway Q Phase 2. Merrillfield Airport, $1,579,618.30. Under the D section of our agenda, D20, AM 285, Chiang Mai Ultimate Thai Restaurant number 4459, transfer of ownership of a restaurant eating place liquor license, Midtown Community Council. In D21 is Assembly Memorandum 289. It's a proprietary purchase for computer software maintenance and support from Questica Incorporated for the IT department, $39,919. D22 is AM 290. It's this amendment number 2 to Prus Construction Company, LLC, for the 40th Avenue Extension, Lake Otis Parkway to Dale Street, Project Management and Engineering Project number 611 for $1,125,000. For introduction, 9F3, there's AO 59. This is an ordinance amending Municipal Code Chapter 1570 Noise Control, providing for clarified definitions, clarified noise permit conditions, adding a section regarding measurements of noise, and amending Section 1460030 to increase fines and to repeal Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations, Chapter 1570. Public hearing on May 24th, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 284. Also for introduction, AO60, an ordinance recommending amendment to Title 31 of the Anchorage Municipal Code. Public hearing on this one is set for May 24th also, and it's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 286. 9F5 for introduction will be AO61. It's an ordinance amending personnel rules, Anchorage Municipal Code sections 3.30.005, 3.30.081, 3.30.082, 3.30.100, 3.30.101, 3.30.102, 3.30.127, 3.30.129, 3.30.131, 132, 133, 3.30.135, 3.30.153, 3.30.154, 3.30.157, 3.30.1510, and 3.30.1516. And this is set for public hearing on the 24th, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 293. Also for introduction, F6, AR 140. This is a resolution appropriating $290,192 from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grants Fund for Amendment Number 2 to a transfer of responsibilities agreement for the Anchorage Metropolitan Area Transportation Solutions 2011 Long Range Transportation Plan Update in the Community Development Department. And that's also set for public hearing on May 24th, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 294. The laid on the table items. Okay. There's a resolution 9A3. This is resolution 143, welcoming Akitan students, educators, and the traditional council president Zenya Borenyan. I hope I said that correctly, and applauding Akitan's investment in youth. 9F7 is ordinance 62. This is an ordinance amending certain sections within Title 31 of the Anchorage Municipal Code to implement recommendations from the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility Board of Directors to enhance business practices and communications. It's also set for public hearing on May 24th, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 296. And then the last item is item 13A3. This is AO 55S1, and this is an ordinance amending Anchorage Code Section 1050-035, 2150-160, and 2150-500 to require ID check for the retail sale and service of alcoholic beverages at a restaurant or eating place at any premises licensed as a beverage dispensary and in the retail sale of alcoholic beverages at a packaged liquor store with specific reference to applicability of 1.45.010, establishing ID check as a condition for use and standard of site plan approval for certain uses related to alcoholic beverages, and establishing immediate effective dates for land use conditional permits and site plan approvals in current use of those designated for those designated uses. Whew. Okay. Well, Mr. Trainee, welcome. He has joined us. Mr. Trainee, we kind of skipped over you since you weren't here. If you have any committee reports you want to bring up? All right.
Sorry for being late.
Well, welcome to, glad to have you. The consent agenda is before us. Motion.
Motion to approve.
All right. Now we'll, was there, oh, no, second.
Sure.
That was seconded by Mr. Starr. We'll now go down and see if there's items. Mr. Flynn, we're picking up background sound from wherever you are. I think I'm hearing myself again. All right.
Sounds like a GPS.
Ms. Drummond, we're going to start with you. Is there anything you'd like to pull?
I need to find it.
Would you like me to start at the other end?
Okay, that's okay.
All right.
I would like to pull, oh, no, that's not on the consent agenda. From the consent agenda, item 9, from the addendum, item 9, Bravo 5.
9 Bravo 5.
And Nine Foxtrot 4, to not introduce. It will be replaced by 9 Foxtrot 7, and 9, from the laid on the table addition, 9A3 for reading.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
91, ma'am.
9E1. Anything else, sir?
That's it, ma'am.
Mr. Honeman?
Not sure if anybody pulled it yet. From the consent agenda, 9 Alpha 2, 9A2.
Alpha 2. Anything else, sir?
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hall?
9D22.
Delta 22.
Yes.
That's it?
That's it.
Mr. Starr?
No items.
Mr. Trombley?
9D11.
Delta 11?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Flynn? Mr. Birch?
My item's been pulled, thank you.
Administration, anything? All right, I'll go over those to make sure I got them right. 9 Alpha 2, 9 Alpha 3, 9 Bravo 5, 9 Delta 11, 9 Delta 22, and 9 Foxtrot 4.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe Mr. Starr is reading 9 Apple 1, and I don't believe that it was pulled. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we'll also pull Alpha 1. Thank you. I'm sorry? Yeah, I got E1. All right, is everybody clear on the items that have been pulled? All right, is there objection? Well, I'll put up the rest of the... Please vote on the remaining part of the consent agenda. Thank you.
Yes.
That item passes unanimously, with Ms. Johnston abstaining on everything tonight. All right, the first item before us then would be 9 Alpha 1. Mr. Starr and Mr. Trauma. All right, is there a representative of the letter carriers who could come forward? Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. Is there opposition to approval? Seeing none, that's approved unanimously.
Thank you.
This is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly supporting the 19th Annual National Association of Letter Carriers Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive to be held on Saturday, May 14th of 2011. Whereas on May 14th, 2011, in more than 10,000 cities and towns in 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam, letter carriers will participate in the National Association of Letter Carriers Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. And whereas last year, the 2010 National Association of Letter Carriers Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive collected a record 77.1 million pounds of food, and whereas the NALC Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive is held annually on the second Saturday in May and is the largest one-day food drive in the nation. Whereas our local letter carriers will be joining in this national day by collecting non-perishable food donations left at mailboxes in the United States post offices for distribution through Food Bank of Alaska to many individuals, the pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters. And whereas Food Bank of Alaska and its more than 300 nonprofit partner agencies and organizations provide emergency food statewide to hungry individuals. And whereas Food Bank of Alaska and partner agencies provide emergency food for an estimated 41,200 people in Anchorage annually, of the households served in Anchorage, 35% are children under 18 years old. And as per Hunger in America of 2010 Anchorage report released in February 2010 by the Mathematical Policy Research, and whereas with the increase in local demand and seasonal lows in foodstuff inventory, the letter carrier's goal this year is to collect more than 90,000 pounds of food locally during this one-day event. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly applauds and supports the 19th Annual National Association of Letter Carriers Food Drive on May 14th of 2011 and encourages the residents of Anchorage to join in this community effort through their donations of non-perishable food, supporting the letter carriers to meet or exceed the 2011 Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive goals, providing needed assistance to our community. This is passed and approved this day of 2011.
Thank you. My name is Jim Raymond. I'm the local NELC president here in Anchorage, representing over 400 active and retired letter carriers from Palmer down to Homer. With me tonight, you can see I have a group of letter carriers that will be helping out on the food drive this Saturday. I also have with me Susanna Morgan. She is the executive director of the food bank. I also have our food drive coordinator with me, Tom Ruggles. He's a retired letter carrier, but he's come out of retirement to help us with the food drive. And he really is not retired, because when he did retire as a letter carrier, he went to work for the rescue mission, and he is the kitchen manager at the rescue mission, helping out still in the community. Each and every day, letter carriers are out there delivering your mail. And this Saturday, we're going to be picking up food, and we're going to be delivering food to the food bank. Letter carriers have been active in communities for many, many years, over 122 years. Letter carriers were the first corporate sponsor for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and we still continue doing that today. This is our 19th year here in Anchorage collecting food for the communities that we deliver in. We see intimately what happens in our communities. Letter carriers are out there day in and day out. They see the homes that are being foreclosed on. They see mail piled up at the mailbox. They see children who don't get food. And through the efforts of the letter carriers, we're going to set a new goal this year, delivering more and picking up more than we did in the years before. I want to just give a moment for Susanna to come up and talk to you about what this food drive means to the community, and then I'll finish off and have Tom speak to you about what it means to his staff at the rescue mission. Susanna?
Thank you very much. We very much appreciate the Assembly supporting the National Association of Letter Carriers. This is one of the 4 largest drives, the second largest drive in the city of Anchorage during the year, coming right up to when kids are out of school in another week. We see our needs surge as kids stop receiving school lunch and school breakfast during that time. So having this food come in right now is exactly what we need, and we are incredibly grateful for the Assembly and even more for the letter carriers for all the work they do to make this possible.
And at the Anchorage Gospel Rescue Mission, we are just one of the organizations that get a benefit from this. There's at least 11 other organizations that collect the food that is donated, and we have like anywhere from 200 to 400 meals a day at the mission that we that we also have that we serve like over 110,000 meals throughout the year. So this is something that really benefits our organization. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you men and women of the U.S. Postal Service for participating in this program. It's really important, and we do see a benefit in the community. And, of course, in my district, in the east side, quite a few in the rescue mission falls just in that other area. So I appreciate you continuing your retirement. Curiously, how large of items have you ever picked up, like box loads? And normally, I know I hang a sack with a few cans and a couple of boxes, but what's the largest quantity you've picked up at one single residence? Does anybody know?
We'll pick up 100-pound bags of rice, cases of peas. So, yeah, and if it's too much, we just come back and we'll pick up the rest later on. So we ask all of you, just put a can or so by your mailbox and letter carriers will pick that up. Or if you have a post office box, you can bring it right into the post office lobby. We have baskets there that we're also collecting food in the post office lobby.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank all of you for being here this evening, and also thank you for your service. And I have to tell you, this food drive is like, I just love it because it's the easiest way to contribute to our neighbors through your service. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We all thank you, and I'm so glad that we get to see you every year, too, on this.
Right.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're now at 9A2.
Move to approve.
This is a resolution recognizing and honoring John E. Adamson, and I didn't see a second yet.
Second.
Thank you. Is there opposition to approval? Seeing none, that is unanimously approved. Could you come on down, Mr. Adamson? Adamson, pardon me.
Come on, you guys get up too. Oh, yeah. This is his parents, and he wouldn't be here without them, so I wanted them to be up here too.
And while we're doing this, if you'd like to step in the front, take pictures while we're doing this. That'd be fine, so you don't worry about that.
Thank you. It's my honor to read this evening Assembly Resolution 2011-136, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring John E. Adamson for 31 years of service with the municipality of Anchorage. Whereas on May 5th, 1980, John Adamson was hired by the Municipality of Anchorage Fire Department, where he has worked continuously until his retirement on May 5th, 2011. And whereas Chief Adamson has held and excelled in each progressive rank from firefighter trainee, firefighter, apparatus engineer, captain, senior captain, and his final position at the time of his retirement of battalion chief. And whereas during his career, Chief Adamson has been decorated with and received the following awards: 2 Fire Chiefs commendations for performance above and beyond the call of duty, promoting a positive image not only of himself, but by extension to the fire department and the municipality of Anchorage. 2 distinguished services recognitions for honoring his special service to the department and the community. 4 unit citations in recognition of outstanding group achievement and teamwork. And whereas Chief Adamson is retiring as one of the commanders of the busiest battalions in the city, Battalion 1A, this area includes the high-rise district of downtown, the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, the Port of Anchorage, the Alaska Railroad District, and Merrill Field Airport. And whereas John retired from the Municipality of Anchorage effective May 5th, 2011, his dedication and commitment to excellence for himself and his crews has contributed to the indelible mark he has left on the department and the people that he served, from the citizens of this great community to the crews that he led. Chief Adamson is noted for his willingness to extend himself for the welfare of his crews, which he, in the truest sense of the word, served. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes and honors John E. Adamson for his 31 years of commitment, dedication, and service to the municipality of Anchorage and the citizens of Anchorage, passed and approved by the Assembly this day. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Assembly members, I'm truly honored to receive this recognition. 31 years is a long time, and it goes by really fast. I'd like to thank my family for being here with me this evening. And I'd like to thank all of you for your past support for Anchorage's emergency services, the police, fire, and EMS. Anchorage is a great community. I grew up here. We were here in the '64 earthquake, and it's been an honor to serve this community all this time. I'd encourage you and respectfully request your support to continue supporting the Anchorage Fire Department in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honan?
Chief, just again, I noted you've risen to the ranks and certainly earned every promotion and accolade that you bestowed upon you, and I do, again, sincerely thank you for your many years of service to this community and in public safety. So thank you again, and hope you don't goof up retirement like I did. Have to do it all over.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate your service, sir. We are a greater city because of it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On the addendum, we're at AR 143, recognizing and welcoming Accutan students.
Madam Chair, can we postpone this item until they arrive? They're still in transit.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Second.
Seeing no objection, we'll move that one down the agenda a bit. And instead, let's see, it looks like we're at Thank you. Mr. Trainee reminded me of something that I was remiss. I want to thank and recognize Barbara Jones. We now have an official ombudsman, and we so much appreciate your willingness to serve in such a vital office, and I am absolutely sure you're going to do a great job at it. Thank you, Barbara. are now at, I believe it's Delta 11, no, B5, I'm sorry. B5, this is the resolution opposing the designation for the NOAA administration critical habitat for beluga whales. Ms. Drummond?
Madam Chair, I wanted to pull that to vote no on it, so I can't
All
move
right.
to approve it.
Is there a motion on this
B5.
item?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. That item is before us. Is there discussion, Ms. Drummond? Would you like to
Discussion
speak
other
to it?
than I disagree.
All right. Anyone else like to speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, thank you. The administration brought this forward. It mirrors a resolution passed by the legislature this year and essentially expresses our displeasure with the designation. Cook Inlet is vital to the economic security of Anchorage and all of South Central, and this designation, we think, overreaches dramatically into our ability to operate both energy projects and shipping projects in Cook Inlet. And so, again, the legislature, in their wisdom, passed a similar resolution. I would urge the body to do so as well.
Mr. Birch?
I just speak in enthusiastic support of this resolution. Clearly, we talk about the airport. We just had a recognized gentleman who's involved in working with the airport and supporting airport operations through the municipal fire department. I think it's absolutely critical that we turn around this critical habitat designation. I mean, the adverse impacts that this has on us potentially through our airport, our water treatment facility out at Point Warrenzoff, and countless other projects and initiatives that we may want to undertake. So I certainly would encourage the body to approve this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, please vote. Mr. Flynn? That item passes 8-2. The next item before us, now I think we're down at Delta 11.
Move approval.
Need a second? That item is before us. Mr. Trombley?
I might have a conflict of interest on this item, so that's why I pulled it.
Could you describe what you believe the potential conflict is, please?
Reeves Amodio is a law firm of which I'm currently a client of, and so I wanted to fully disclose that before I voted on it.
Is your relationship with this law firm in any way related to this legal service contract for environmental services?
No, ma'am.
Is your contract with, or your economic association with Reeves Amodia one that will matter if we approve this or disapprove this? Will anything change with your situation with the law firm?
No, ma'am.
Next, I'm going through these questions that we have on the front. And is your contract with this law firm a substantial part of the law firm's cases? In other words, are you the primary client?
No.
No. All right. I'm going to rule that you do not have a conflict, in that it's not directly related to the case that's before us, and it's not a substantial economic part of either the attorney or your personal financial situation. So I'm going to ask that you contribute and vote on this discussion. Is there any further discussion on this particular matter? Hearing and seeing none, please vote. Mr. Flynn? Yes. Thank you. That item is approved, 10 2-0. Thank you. The next item before us is 9E2, the sole source procurement report. Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I missed one. 9 Delta.
Second.
Hold on a minute. 9 Delta 22. This is the amendment number 2 to Prue's Construction Company, LLC, 40th Avenue Extension, Lake Otis to Dale. And I need a motion on that one.
I pull that to be considered following 11A.
All right, so you're basically wanting to move it down on the agenda?
Move it down on the agenda to follow 11A.
Is there objection from anyone about moving this down further on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, we'll discuss that later when we deal with 11A. Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Starr, on that one. The next, then, got so many pieces of paper here to keep track of. I believe now we are at E2. Mr. Trainee, this is the sole source procurement. E1.
I pulled E1, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. I've been there, I know.
You want to make the motion, sir?
Move to accept.
Second.
All right, go ahead.
Just administration. I noticed that this runs about $160,000, and I got the memo that this is to provide TV service to people that are homeless. My only question is, do we go to another source for funding, or do we just automatically assume people are homeless and don't have any other coverage?
Diane Engel will answer the question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, Diane Engel, Director of the Anchorage Department of Health and Human Services, for the record. We look for other sources. In fact, some of the money does come to us from other sources. Grants, we get grant sources to run the state, TB, immunization, all the sorts of clinical services, epidemiology services on behalf of the state and the municipality, and some of that money is state funded. We also have networks with case managers throughout the city. So when a person's getting released from the hospital, we try to work and see what other options might be gotten. If we can't find anything, it's in the public's best interest that a newly infectious or newly identified infectious TB client be housed in a place that doesn't make him or her a danger to the public.
I have a little familiarity with TB. My mother had it for 7 years and was put in an institution because of it. That was a method they used to deal with people that had TB. You either lived or died when you went to the place that people at TB went to. So are we doing that with them now? I just want to make sure, because I understand that a lot of the TB cases are from the Native communities. Are we tracking that back to Native healthcare system?
We have, through the chair, Mr. Trainee, same person for the record, we have a TB case management meeting every couple of weeks with our medical doctor, with the state's TB nurse, and with our staff. And we look at those cases. Oftentimes people get shipped in here for treatment. People do not stay in the hospital very long at all. The reason that we house them is so that we can get them to their past infectious state. And once we know that you are no longer infectious, and we can have a trained nurse giving them therapy so that once they're not spreading disease unnecessarily. Once you're no longer infectious, as long as you remain compliant by taking your medication, which we work with you by going out, staying here, Mr. Trainee, it's Tuesday, it's time to take these pills, and we watch you take them. That's the national best practice for TB management.
My cell phone tells me every day when to take them. But
so we do that, and it's a very, very rare event anymore that somebody would be isolated or would be in the hospitalized against their will.
As this is in the 30s, that was the only treatment they had. So I just wanted to make sure that we're actually confining the people until they're not infectious, because TB can spread like wildfire.
Right. We are for doing that, and we follow them on a routine basis.
Thank you, Madam.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, I don't have any problem with accepting this item.
I guess it goes to the second, Ms. Engel, before you walk in. Is there monitoring of the hotel rooms, Ms. Engel? Ms. Engel, real quick. Is there monitoring of the hotel rooms wherever these clients are to determine that there's no potential harm to spread? I mean, who's responsible for, I guess, cleanup or sanitation?
TB is an airborne disease, which is why we only work with hotels who have outside entrances and individual airflow in the rooms. That's why not everybody is a candidate for that. There's only a few people. We work with hotels and give them special instructions for cleaning and how to clean up things and how to dispose things. As long as people follow that and as long as people are compliant, the risks to the general public or to the people working there should be very minimal.
Thank you.
Can I go now?
Excuse me. Objection to acceptance of this report? Seeing no objection, that report is accepted unanimously. Is there anyone in the audience that we just appointed to a board or commission? Appears to be not. Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson, if you could keep an eye out and let me know on that B item. All right. We'll just continue to let that slide then. We're now at 11A on the agenda. Notice of reconsideration has been given for project for AR 82, approving the 40th Avenue Water Intertie and providing for assessment of the benefit of properties. That motion has already been made and seconded, so at this time, that matters before us. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to the reconsideration motion?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I'm actually conflicted out on the item, so I'll probably just leave the room for the debate. Would you like that?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Starr.
And D22, they're similar, so I'll come back and declare my conflict on D22 when you get to that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Drummond?
Madam Chair, I'm supposed to be calling up the motion for reconsideration.
Yes, ma'am. You did.
All right, that would be before us for, should we speak to that?
That's exactly what we're doing right now,
Great.
ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I asked for reconsideration of this item the day after it failed, when I understood from Ms. Gray-Jackson, who represents that area, that to not install this water line at the time that the road is being torn up would be hugely disruptive to this neighborhood, and it was unclear to me, as I'm sure it was to the rest of the Assembly, how it was being paid for. It was clarified for me by AWWU's director, Mr. Primo, and I agreed to bring it back and before us for reconsideration and hopefully for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley on reconsideration.
The reason I voted no on this in the first place was because I was working under the assumption that the property owners in the area had no choice but to be assessed a levy on their property, regardless of whether or not they chose to hook up to city water. Am I correct in saying that that is not true, that they will only be assessed?
Mr. Primo, would you come forward, please? Or whoever you'd like to designate. And go ahead.
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, that is correct. They will only be assessed upon the owner's choice for connection.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Birch?
I'm just speaking in favor of reconsideration and in favor of the original motion, and would urge an affirmative vote in both cases. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were some concerns regarding Providence, and Mr. Primo sent a memo explaining it. But just for the record, Mr. Primo, I hate to bug you, but could you come up and just briefly state what you stated in your email in that regard, in particular for the person who was concerned about paying the assessment? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, Ms. Gray-Jackson, as I pointed out, I believe to all the Assembly members with a very similar email, there are four major reasons for this project. One is to provide redundancy to the critical health and safety services of the Providence complex. There's a main line that goes through that area that has had a history of breaks. Should that main line break, there is no redundancy feed for the campus, also for the Providence complex. There is 14 properties that will be served by this project. It is being done for utility benefit, not those 14 properties as which. That's why there's a luck roll in front of you to identify what the assessment would be should they choose to hook up. It also allows us to combine 2 pressure zones in the area into 1 pressure zone, which will increase fire flow and redundancy to over 18,000 dwelling units in that whole general area of town. So those are the main points for the project. And it is also being done in combination with a PM&E road job, which obviously increases the efficiency of the product.
Thank you, Mr. Primo. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Madam Chair.
I voted against this project because I have a long-standing disagreement with the tariff rules that regulate main extensions. We had a situation that Mr. Primo is very aware of in Peters Creek on the Connect View Estates, where property owners on good wells basically had the note, or I guess the lien word is not the correct word, but a note on their plat that they had to pay this assessment if they sold their property. And at the time, I lobbied strongly for AWU to appeal the tariff regulations to the RCA. Basically, the decision was not to do that. The gentleman came forward, and it seemed to me an identical situation. I do not think that the particular project is wrong. I think the project is needed. I really object to the process. So Mr. Primo and I emailed back, and I'm going to ask him on the record the question that I asked him in email. Mr. Primo, you told me that you would be willing to advocate that AWU look at this tariff once more?
That is correct, Madam Chair. As I indicated to you in the email, we have looked at it previously. In fact, it was in 2008. I do concur with you that there is an inequity there at times. I don't know what the answer is, but we're willing to look at it again and see if we can come up with a better answer. Since our board looked at it and had work sessions with the Assembly, I would invite any input that the Assembly might have into that process. I think it would be more meaningful.
If you could notify me when your board is discussing this, I would love to come and speak to your board, and I could bring some people.
Ms. Osiander, we would, and as I said in my email, I think we should wait till we get Title 31 behind us, so we understand the process.
I hear you. With that assurance, I'm going to be voting yes on this reconsideration, but Mr. Trombley, even though it's not an immediate lien, it is a note on the property, and the people can't say no. And as such, I think that there should be some voice. And right now, we don't have it. There's no other way to do it, though. If we want this water main extension, we have to follow the tariff regulations, and this is the only way we can pay for it.
And just one other note, the tariff regulation is driven by state law.
Absolutely. I understand. That's why it's not something that we can unilaterally decide to change. It's a process. You were very, what's the right word? I guess articulate in advocating for or explaining the expense and difficulty of doing that 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now.
3 years ago, right.
But I continue to think it's needed. So thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Trainey.
Madam Chair, just urge the body to vote to reconsider this item. This neighborhood needs this water line through there, so I'd ask you to reconsider the motion we took earlier on this.
All right. The motion to reconsider is in front of us. A yes vote has been urged. Mr. Flynn? Thank you. And Mr. Starr is excused. That item passes 9-0. All right. The matter is back before us. Motion would be in order. Mr. Flynn? Okay, Mr. Flynn, could you hold until I get a motion? Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
I'm sorry, the screen wasn't up. I apologize. All right, that motion is before us. Go ahead, Mr. Flynn. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Would you like a representative from AWU to address that, Mr. Flynn? Was that a question for them? All right. Is there anyone else in queue that would like to speak to it? Mr. Trombley.
So just for clarification, regardless of whether or not you hook up to the water line and are therefore on city water, your property will still be assessed a value at which some point in time it will have to be paid. Am I? I'm just looking for clarification because what you told me before we voted for the motion to reconsider.
It's not an immediate assessment.
But at some point it will, when you sell your home.
It depends on the lender. Some lenders, Mr. Primo, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Through the chair, Mr. Trombley. The city, the utility, does not put a lien against the home.
Mm-hmm.
It is recorded against the property that there's a potential assessment. Depending upon the lending institution that you're dealing with, the lending institution may choose to require you to hook up to the water line. It may not choose to hook up to the water line. VA requires it. HUD requires it if it's within 3% or less of the value of the property. I'm not aware of any other lending institutions requiring it. But it's a decision with respect to the people carrying the paper, not a decision with respect to the city or the utility for requiring to hook up.
It's a note on the plat.
Okay, that's another.
Go ahead.
So my other question for you is, and it ties into what Mr. Flynn was saying, was if the sole purpose of this water line is to serve the university as a redundancy for the university and for the hospital, the reason that they're not being asked to cover the majority of the cost, because that's the basis for this, is due to state law that if the water line goes through, then there's no one else to pay for it other than the property that it runs by. Am I correct on that? It's not. Is it possible to go to Providence or the university, or who are the direct, real beneficiaries of this?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, as I stated earlier, there's actually two major driving reasons for it: redundancy for critical infrastructure of the hospital, and also so we can combine two pressure zones into one. Mm-hmm. That serves over 18,000 dwelling units. We are following process of state law, process of municipal code, and process of the tariff. Should we want to go to Providence Hospital and ask them to pay for it, we could. I think I know what the answer would be. They're not required by any law to do it. I believe it's the responsibility of the utility to provide service to our customers, and specifically when you have critical infrastructures that we cannot supply should the main line break. I think this is something we should do. There is no process by which requires us to talk to Providence or any reason for them to come forward with any money. The concerns that Ms. Osiander had that we spoke to earlier about looking back at this issue to see if there's a different way to handle in the future is what we agreed to do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Flynn? That is approved 8-1. I'm sorry. Okay. The clerk has reminded us that it is now time to go back to the item on the consent agenda that we postponed, Delta 22, and that specifically is, here it is. This is amendment number 2 to Pru's Construction Company, LLC, for 40th Avenue Extension, Lake Otis Parkway to Dale Street for $1,125,000.
Madam Chair, I have a conflict of interest on this.
Because this is basically the same project.
It is. It's I have property that connects from that, and it's been proven that my company benefits from that development.
All right, Mr. Starr, I'm going to continue with our past practice and say you're excused from this one. I see on the screen, Mr. Honeman, did you move approval for this amendment?
I,
the contract?
yes, I did.
All right, and Mr. Trombley was the second. So that matter is before us. Would anyone like to speak to this? Hearing and seeing no one, please vote. Mr. Flynn? And that passes, I'm losing count here, 9-0. Thank you. All right. That brings us to our time constraint. Is it 6? All right. Is Mr. McNabb here? Mr. McNabb is speaking tonight about parking enforcement. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Anchorage Assembly. My name is Mark McNabb. In much of the 1990s, I was also known as Parking Enforcement Officer 811 with the Anchorage Parking Authority. Assembly members, you will soon be deciding about who to assign parking enforcement to. I'm sure it is your wish that this new era of parking enforcement occurs with few complaints before you, the mayor, letters to the editor, and I'm sure you want to avoid another proposition forcing parking enforcement back to the police. Mr. Hall, I heard you on the radio before April's election addressing some concerns by explaining that parking tickets will only be written for parking issues, unlike many of the tickets I used to write for expired tags, no front plates, and out of season studded tires. This will go a long way toward having fewer complaints. The reason why I'm addressing you today is about priorities. If maximum profit is the aim of parking enforcement, then the way it was done in the 1990s is the way to go, and that is to keep the overhead costs down by contracting with a security guard company to hire enforcement officers and pay them whatever most unarmed security officers get, which is a few dollars above minimum wage but low enough to qualify for food stamps. The negative aspects of going with a security guard company for parking enforcement personnel are too many to mention in this 3-minute speech. It is my wish to address these issues that I worked with but may not be realized to the planners and leaders of this new effort. There are significant issues to think through so that effective and knowledgeable personnel are walking the rounds in downtown Anchorage, greeting the public, explaining parking laws and parking tickets and writing parking tickets when necessary. These viewpoints need to be heard. The higher the wage offered, then you get the correspondingly higher quality applicants walking through the door. And if parking enforcement officers are direct employees, then those applicants can be evaluated directly about their views of customer service. Let's do what we can to make these official encounters with the public be as positive as possible. I am asking that the Anchorage Assembly to exercise personal interest in this success in getting this new parking enforcement effort started well, with friendly, customer service-oriented officers getting decent wages and benefits.
Thank you, sir. There appear to be no questions, but we are going to be watching this closely. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
We are now, well, we're about to take a dinner break, but before we do, I wanted to let people know that the ID check for alcohol, which is the next item on our agenda, there are two versions before us. There was a version that was laid on the table where the ID check would apply only to packaged retail stores, as well as the version that many of you are familiar with that's been circulated widely. Additionally, about 15 or 20 minutes before the meeting started, we were told that legal department has some concerns and questions about some state law which might intersect with what we're trying to do here tonight. Because of those legal concerns, I just want to let you know that we will continue this matter. We will take public testimony, but we will not be voting on it this evening. So as such, if you have a conflict and you need to get out of here, you may want to come back. And I know there's a high school graduation going on. You may want to come back to the next meeting. But that's generally the situation we're in. We will open the public hearing on it, though, as soon as we get back from our dinner break. We are now in recess. Of the Anchorage Assembly back to order. We are at item 13A on our agenda. This is an ordinance, and I'm actually, if there's no objection, going to move to combine the public hearings on the two liquor ID. Is there any objection to doing that? Thank you. If you'd like to speak on either of the two versions of photo ID requirements for alcohol, feel free to come forward. I would like to tell you, if you weren't here earlier, I announced that there will not be a vote on this item tonight because of some legal information that we just received. So we're going to have the public hearing and then move to continue it to our next meeting. If you'd like to speak to this, please come forward. And if you could, state your name and spell it for the record, please. Thank you.
My name is Jeannie Riley, Jeanne Reilly. I'm from Riley's Irish Pub on Fireweed. My place is small and more times than not staffed by one person. We have a lot of regular customers, and the new ones we watch, check out, and get to know. We ID the young, confirm they are over 21. We strive to provide a clean, safe environment. To have my staff and myself card everyone every day is ridiculous. This will not fix the community's problem with the 486 restricted licenses. If this law goes into effect, it'll only punish those in the majority instead of the guilty minority. Thank you, and I hope your decision will be to scratch the whole 100% ID checking.
Thank you. There appear to be no questions.
My name is Isidore Cordova. Spelling is Isidor. Last name is Cordova, Cordova. I came here to Anchorage in 1965, and today I'm just here to testify that I'm not going to delude myself. I'm going to change anybody's idea, but I embellish the idea that I am here to speak for myself and some of my fellow constituents I work with. When I first came here to Anchorage, we had to have a liquor handler's permit. It was they were issued by the police department. We had to take TB tests, and we had to take these renew our licenses every year. And at that time, it was $5. Now we are required to take a TAM class, which is called technical alcohol management, and we pay $40 for that class. The people are well informed of the red lights and green lights, how to serve customers and ID. I think that for you to impose this restriction on restaurants and bars, I would work in a small bar, that it would make very difficult, and you'd have to hire. If you're busy, you have to just be on your toes, and plus we're always on our toes and defensive in the bar business. And I'm thankful that you let me come here and speak my mind, and I'm only self-gratification. That's why I'm here, and I hope that you consider us in this business. Thank you.
Thank you. The clerk reminded me that I spoke inaccurately. There is still the original version that was put forth that calls for an ID check at every time a drink is served, and then there is a substitute version that the committee worked on, the original sponsors worked on, that took out restaurants, and then there is another version, and then has delayed. Mr. Honeman, correct me if I'm wrong, that has a delayed implementation
at bars,
and then there's a third version that just was introduced tonight that just affects package retail stores. So those are the three versions that are out there. So, thank you for your testimony.
Oh, I also want to testify to tell you, is like, I go on the old thing, like, when they came for the Indians, I said nothing. When they came for the natives, I said nothing. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing. And then they came for me, and there was nobody to speak up for me. That's how I feel about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Craig Niles. Niles is spelled Niles. And I've been in Alaska since 1952. And I just wanted to say that, relate an incident that happened to me at Fred Meyer's here in Anchorage. I was standing in the liquor store buying a bottle of wine, and they were carting everybody, and an elderly gentleman, and when I say elderly, he was older than I, so he got up there, and he was from Washington State, and the young woman asked him for his ID. He says, no, I'm going to pay for this Jim Means with cash. You know, he thought it was a credit card related. She said, no, I need to see your ID. And this gentleman was so confused, and finally somebody from the line said, no, it's a policy here. You got to show him he goes, oh, I don't understand. Anyway, eventually, he got through. And I want to tell you that I read in the paper where the State Department was going to bring up dignitaries up here, some program they had. And can you imagine the embarrassment of the State Department when they sit down and they go to buy alcohol and they have to show ID from Kenya to buy a drink or to buy alcohol? I want to say that I'm embarrassed because of this. Thank you very much.
Just a minute. Mr. Honeman has a question.
Mr. Niles, right here. I'm a retired police lieutenant, about 25 years in law enforcement, and I was just last week in Baton Rouge at a conference. About half of those folks are police officers active. We were at a restaurant in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We were having dinner. It's a seafood restaurant. And about 6 of the 8 ordered a beer or some sort of drink with their dinner. And the restaurant waitress actually asked, she said, I'll be glad to serve you alcohol, but I need to see ID card from every one of you. Now, I'm 50 years old. I know I probably look a little younger than that.
Yeah, I would ID card you.
I pulled my ID out, and the waitress actually took a few minutes looking at it, kind of puzzled. And I'm thinking to myself, is she really looking that closely to see if I'm over 21? Was my thought. And she said, sir, can you show me where the expiration date is? So she was looking for a valid ID, not just an ID card that had a picture on it. So I'm here to tell you that in other locations, other cities around the United States, they do ask to see your ID card for whatever reasons. I didn't ask, and I should have. But it didn't embarrass 6 of our law enforcement officers who are over 21, and it didn't take but a second. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Stuart Grenier, Stuart-Grenier. I'm Vice President of the Northeast Community Council in Muldoon, and as you all know, our council has been deeply involved in this. I've been up here so many times and at so many of these meetings that have been held by members of this assembly. I'm going to try best not to repeat myself. But I would like to say that you can't drive your vehicle without an ID. You can't do a lot of things without an ID. And as you all remember, one of the big motivating factors for this was the folks are accessing alcohol through the homeless in the park near my house. And it came out in the newspaper. We've known it's been going on for a long time. It's still going on. And because of what Harry Crawford and others in Juneau have done, 3 public inebriates citations for being a public inebriate, and you could also get a red stripe. What I would hope is that this body, it goes as far as it can with the carry-out liquor stores. I realize that the bars was not on the recommendation, vote. But if that's causing a big problem, just go for the carry-out liquor stores now. We can have another advisory vote. Next time, please word the advisory vote correctly. You did not mention red stripe in the advisory vote last time. That threw a lot of people off. If they know the purpose of checking ID is to prevent known drug drivers, people who are on parole or probation, and people who are in the parks who've had 3 citations for public inebriation, then you're going to get it up in the 80s or 90s. And that's what's going to happen next time, so let's just start the process again for the bars if that's what it takes. But for the carry-out liquor stores, that's my number one concern. As you know, in Muldoon, we have way too many, and the problem still exists. So another idea I'd like to suggest, you guys have the meter maids now, or whatever you call the folks who write tickets. We need something like that for the inebriates. And I suggest that it's channeled through the community councils that care. We could get the training through the Muni. You probably wouldn't have to pay volunteers enough or much. And we could, we know who these people are. They're in the parks, they're in our neighborhoods, and we could find a way to cite them for public inebriation. And once they get their 3, then they got the red stripe. It came up at that meeting that some of you are at with Paul and Mr. Hall. People kept saying, well, they'll do whatever it takes to get their booze. Well, what's been happening up to date is this town has facilitated these people just to maximize sales of alcohol. And it's done on your watch and everybody who's been here before you. So let's change the tune a little bit, not maximize sales. You're just telling these people, here's your booze, go in the woods, have fun, commit suicide slowly at the expense of the public who wants to use the parks. So.
Mr. Birch has a question.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Birch.
Thank you for your testimony. One question I had, how long do those red stripes last in the car? Is it like a year, 2 years, 5 years, forever? Or?
You know, Mr. Birch, just at the point we're at now in my community, I'm not really overly concerned about that because we'll be able to tweak this. Once the basic pattern is set, I think public comment will be able to tweak it. But first of all, this body has to get over the idea that selling alcohol is the number one priority. Selling alcohol to responsible people is the number one priority. And that's how it should be. And this community's taken a back seat over and over again because the wrong people are having way too much influence. Just look what happens at the community council level. Nobody gets money to campaign at the community council level. Community council at our side of town is very much in favor of this. But every time we come up before here, where money is needed to get elected, you guys keep fumbling the ball. Now, this time, hopefully it's not going to get fumbled. Hopefully at least you'll get the carry-out liquor stores, and then we can start the process again, even if it takes another year. Please word the amendment correctly, and let's see what the people think. Okay. Because everybody drives on the road, walks next to the road, and a lot of people want to use their parks. And just another point, I think there's a difference in the way the police respond to homeless people in certain parts of town and other parts of town. I don't think it's the same.
Okay.
And
there are several people who've got questions for you.
okay, good.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I guess the pushback I've heard is that there's 400 or 500 people with red stripes. I'm still trying to figure out how long those stripes last on a driver's license,
Mr.
and we'll figure that out,
Yeah.
I guess, in subsequent testimony. But the pushback I get is there's 200,000 people out there that are of age and qualified, if you will, in the city and able to buy alcohol, but you're basically requiring 200,000 to have produce ID when you've got the problems maybe focused on 400 or 500 people.
Okay.
But it's the repeat offenders that are often, do we have to show pictures of dead people? I think we got a whole book full of pictures of dead people. There's a lady here with one.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Representative Crawford can give us detail on that red stripe later. Mr. Trainee, you're next. But we will get to everybody. You really don't need to stand up. I promise you'll get to speak. But Mr. Trainee?
I don't have to believe you.
I don't think they do either.
Just, have you looked out on the web? Because I just brought up while you were talking Indiana. They went into effect on 1 July of 2010, mandatory ID check to buy alcohol at every place in Indiana. Now,
Well,
package stores everywhere. So you might want to take a look at it.
Okay, thanks. That's an argument in favor of what we're doing. I don't see why we really have to look to lower 48 for leadership. We got our problems here, and we need to solve them here. But thanks, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you,
Mr. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stuart, thank you for your testimony. Did I hear you say that we need to word it correctly and then see what the people think?
Yeah, well, no. I'm not upset with the 67%.
No.
It's just, if people don't understand, when they're talking about checking IDs, they're talking about restricted IDs, the people that have already been caught repeatedly drunk driving or beating up their spouse or doing who knows what to their, because of alcohol. And now people who've been cited 3 times for public inebriation. When people understand that that's what we're voting about, when we're voting about ID required, then I think you're going to get a lot more than 67%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Royal Bidwell, Royal Bidwell. I'm with the Forget Me Not Mission, and this is a nonprofit that we formed for the express purpose of reducing some of the insanity of impaired driving crashes and underage drinking in Alaska. And we are in support of the version of the ordinance that would require both packaged liquor stores and bars to comply, and understanding that there's a delayed compliance on the part of the bars. And as far as concern about the inconvenience to the servers in the bars, this is really a very serious issue in this state, so it deserves a very serious effort. And of course, a lot of that serious effort is going to have to take part in the bars and the liquor stores. And the question that comes to my mind is how much good, what improvements, what benefits has liquor brought to our society? And I think if you make a double column list of the benefits on one side and the negative aspects on the other side, it's going to look terribly lopsided. So with that in mind, why are we so timid, so hesitant, reluctant to place any restrictions on the sale and consumption of alcohol? I think we need to be very aggressive with this, and this ordinance is really a tiny step in the right direction. So I think it's incumbent on this body to take action, because the voters have expressed their desires, and I believe if you polled those 67% that voted for this, I personally believe you would find that they voted for mandatory ID checks for the purchase of liquor, period, without regard to the type of establishment, without regard to the type of container it's going to be served in. And I also believe that if you poll the ones that voted against it, I think we would find that at least some of them voted against it because it did not include bars and restaurants. So I urge you, on behalf of Forget Me Not Mission, to vote on this ordinance and pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Oh, hold on. Sir, could you come back? Dick, did you want to have a question?
I was just going to tell.
Go ahead, Mr.
Sir, thank you for
Trainee.
coming and testifying. I just wanted to relate to you, as I did the other gentleman, that Tennessee did this a year ago, too. Mandatory ID check everywhere.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rosetta Dimicelli, Rosettadimiceli. I owned a Blue Fox over on Tudor Road for 37 years. I have no problem with checking IDs. We do it all the time, and we do it for 80% of our customers. The problem I have is the restaurants are going to be exempt, and I don't know what makes this assembly think the restaurants serve any less liquor than the bars do. We serve food also, and we don't want to inconvenience the tourists, but we don't mind inconveniencing the few customers that I have had for 37 years that come in every day and have a cup of coffee or just come in and have a sandwich, and I'm going to have to ID them. And if my employees forget to ID them, they're going to get fined. I get so tired of everybody trying to find a way to fine us. This is my problem. I have no problem with checking IDs, but if a man goes out and has a cigarette and he comes back in, do I have to check his ID again? No.
We'll get that later, I think.
This is what I want to know. I want to know how this law is worded. I want to know if every time a man walks out the door in the back and smokes and he comes back in, he has to check his ID again. If old Pete, who's been coming in my bar every day for 37 years, comes in at 10 o'clock for a cup of coffee, at 12 o'clock for a sandwich, and back at 5 for his one beer that he drinks every day, am I going to have to check this 93-year-old man's ID 3 times a day? And if my employee doesn't check his ID, is she going to get a fine? Am I going to have all my employees having nervous breakdowns from stings and fines and everything else, that every time they go to serve a drink, if they forget to check my 93-year-old or 85-year-old customer's ID, they're going to get a fine? But I can go and eat in any restaurant in this town, and I'm not going to get my ID checked, and I can order 2 martinis and a bottle of wine and 3 after-dinner drinks, and nobody's going to check my ID. Something is not right about this scenario. And what makes anybody here think that the restaurants don't serve as much liquor as the bars? And that's my argument. I think we need to be treated fairly. And in this case, we're not. My help, they're concerned that they're going to get fined if they forget to check one of my older customers' IDs. What's going to happen here? I need some answers.
Mr. Trombley, you have a question?
I appreciate you coming down. You say you've been the business owner for 37 years?
Yes.
My question for you is this. The purpose of the red stripe was that if someone went to purchase alcohol and on their ID it shows a red stripe, so the person who looks at the ID says, well, you can't purchase alcohol. In your experience in being a business owner, how many people come in with red stripes that you have to deny?
In my place right now?
Yes, ma'am. Or do you ever see that?
I really wouldn't know if any of them have red stripes. If I have any problem drinkers at all, I don't let them come back in. I'm a small neighborhood place. I don't have time for people that cause problems. But can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
If I have a red stripe on my driver's license and I go downtown and I eat in a restaurant and I have a drink, who's going to monitor me?
Correct. Well, make a good point. I was just wondering, as a business owner, how many red stripes that you see, if you do see them at all.
I have never seen any red stripes.
Okay. All right.
And my employees haven't either. So do they put red stripes on a state ID card? They do? Okay. I didn't know that. But I'm just thinking if somebody had a red stripe on their ID card, they'd find a way to show me a different piece of ID. That's what my problem is, too. They don't have to show us this driver's license with these red stripes on it. What if they have a passport?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Honeman and
Ma'am, just real quick,
Yeah.
one of the intent of any ordinance, and there's always unintended consequences that are missed, and that's why you'll see oftentimes laws that are amended and adjusted, sometimes even abolished if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't resolve the issue that it's dealing with. But frankly, I agree with you. I think all point of sale of alcohol should have the same requirement, and that makes it a more fair and equitable system. We've heard from several folks in the restaurant industry that, number one, there are more enhanced training, that a percentage of their sales in their restaurants that are involving alcohol is such a small amount, considering, for instance, most of the time I drink iced tea, drink water at several of the restaurants that I know serve alcohol as well. The issue for me is the intent behind making sure you ask the question. If you have the same customer come in, I think the distinction here is if it's the same server who recognizes the same person, they've checked them once for the day, can clearly make that argument that they've met that intent.
Are they going to get a fine for if they didn't check him the second time he came in and there's somebody, a policeman or somebody sitting at the bar?
Certainly would bring question, but at the same time, you'd have to show or prove that you've already checked the ID. I mean, again, language that wasn't initially in the ordinance was those bars that actually check 100% IDs and turn away folks at their door before they even walk in, should their service be required then. The language was amended, in fact, as a result of some testimony we received from several operators, that would meet the intent if you're checking 100% of the folks coming in your door. So I just wanted you to know there's a lot of things that have taken place on this particular ordinance since it was drafted, and we would continue to amend if necessary. I know I would commit to that as we find issues that we may have either missed, overlooked, or didn't catch. And so I agree with you. I think it should be 100% across the board. We have a couple of versions of this ordinance, and that's why we're getting your information. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Linda Kellen, K-E-L-L-E-N, also known as Linda Kellen Beagle. We have been here before. As this body knows, there was a previous version of this ordinance several years ago, specifically meant to target the red stripe licenses. At the request of the hospitality industry, this body pulled that ordinance while Assemblyman Mike Gutierrez helped secure an arrangement with the packaging stores who agreed to do the ID checks on their own. However, the agreement fell through. It was made clear that the industry was not holding up its end of the bargain. Thus, we have this ordinance before us. Like I said, we've been here before. While the eternal debate rages across the country about the size of government, this timeline of events demonstrates one necessary role. Government must regulate industries that cannot or will not regulate themselves when public safety is at risk. And we should not expect the alcohol industry to remain unbiased. According to a study by Columbia University, it is estimated that over 30% of industry profits come from those considered to be problem drinkers by health services definitions. You will hear testimony from folks that addicts who wish to drink will find other ways to do so. In many cases, I know this to be true, as I am a recovering alcoholic with 26 years sobriety. However, it has been made clear this ordinance needs to be established in order for the red stripe law to even be followed. Also, having experienced the death of a friend's only child at the hands of a man with 5 previous DWIs, I believe that this ordinance, if it stops just one drunk driver from getting on the road, is more than worth it. And for the record, as much as I might agree with making all of the alcohol industry obey, that's not the ordinance that's not the thing that people voted on. The people voted on the package stores. And I think that you're going to get a whole lot of testimony against this as a result of that. And I think that you guys just need to move forward and get one thing out of the way and then put, like the gentleman from the community council said, put something else out there for the rest of the alcohol industry and refine it. So because I do understand what this woman is saying, not having restaurants do it and having the bars do it, there is definitely some unfairness there. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Crawford, welcome.
Former.
I'm sorry.
Harry Crawford, and former state representative and the author of the original Red Stripe Law. The reason why I did this was because on Christmas Eve night, 2004, my wife walked out of our church with my 11-year-old son, and as they were walking down the street to the vehicle, they were hit from behind, or my wife was hit from behind. They missed my son. It was a repeat offender that had blood alcohol content of over 0.35, more than 4 times the legal limit. And I found out that he was a repeat offender after the fact, and that he had multiple offenses. It's 32 years old. You can't get to the point where you can walk upright and have a .35 without a lot of practice at it. As I was standing in the emergency room, not knowing whether my wife was going to live or die, a number of people came in and asked me if they caught the guy. I didn't care if they caught the guy. He'd already done his damage. All I was worried about at the time was whether my wife was going to live, whether the mother of my children was going to live. If we were going to have the center of our family still there the next day or the day after that. I thought, what can I do to make a difference? Because I've known people to be killed and maimed from alcohol. I've known people that were beaten by their husbands and all from alcohol abuse. What can I do to stop this? So I started to investigate and found out that we already have orders that the judges put on these repeat offenders not to buy, consume, or enter the premises where alcohol is sold for purposes of buying alcohol. That's already there. When I authored the Red Stripe Law, all I did was give people a way to identify who those people were so they could stop breaking the law. Because every time we allow one of those folks to walk into a bar or a restaurant or a package store and buy more alcohol, we're enabling them to continue to break the law. The answer to your question, Assemblyman Birch, is that it stays on there as long as the sentence and the parole and or probation. As soon as that's over, they can apply for a new license without the red stripe. In the case of the fellow that hit my wife, because he was a repeat offender, it was 4 years in prison and 4 years of probation, so it would have been a total of 8 years. Most wouldn't have that long of a sentence, but when it's an egregious issue, like with the guy that hit my wife, that's a longer sentence.
We do have several questions.
Well, I'm ready, willing, and able to answer.
Okay, Mr. Birch, you're first.
Well, just wanted to thank you for coming down and kind of clarifying that. We've had some communication and some suggestions actually regarding some of the technologies changing. I mean, I find out that Apple's following me around every minute of the day with the iPhone, and I guess one of the questions I had was regarding the ankle bracelets or some of the technologies that are out there that that a judge could impose, maybe in addition to or instead of a red stripe that actually would focus on the 400 or 500 people in Anchorage out of the 200,000 that are a problem. And I guess I just curious as if you considered that or monitored that or have had any insight in that perspective.
We tried several different avenues when we were trying to get this law passed. It was killed by opposition several times in several different ways. This was the cheapest and easiest way to identify people. You didn't have to have a chip. People didn't have to install any new equipment. All they had to do was just whip your driver's license out and see if it's red or blue. It's just so simple. And every time they talk about how inconvenienced it is, how much of an inconvenience is it when you write a check and they ask you for your driver's license? How much of an inconvenience is it when you go to Costco and you get your card out to show that you're a member of Costco? How much of an inconvenience is it to get on an airplane and show your driver's license? It's not a problem. We do it every day, several times a day. Everybody's got some sort of ID, and the only reason why they don't want to show it is because there's going to be a problem if they show it and it's got a red one. It's not about catching people with a red red stripe. It's about keeping those people out of the bars, out of the restaurants, and out of the package stores for purposes of buying alcohol. That's all this is about. We don't want to catch them to get the $1,000 fine. That's immaterial. What we want to do is prevent this from happening. There's carnage on our streets. You've got people right in here right now that have been, their loved ones have been hurt or maimed, as myself, and that's the reason why we want to do this. It's a dangerous drug that these fellows purvey, but I know I get overcome by this whole thing.
Yeah, and you have more questions.
But I wanted to say that the 486 in Anchorage, the reason for that is that we have a municipal prosecutor's office. They're not doing these like the state is. In Fairbanks, we have about 900 of them there. And those are the ones that have actually been picked up by people at the DMV. There have been several thousand more that have orders that haven't gone and gotten the red stripe. So there's several thousand out there, more than 4,000 that should have these red stripes on their licenses. But only 2,886 have actually picked them up at the DMV.
Anything else, Mr. Birch? Mr. Honeman.
Yeah, you answered part of that question. How many people in the state of Alaska are in condition, do you know, that have this red stripe?
There's more than 4,000, but what we found out is that the municipal prosecutors aren't following through on this. The state prosecutors are. That's the reason why we have so much less in Anchorage than we have in Fairbanks and even North Pole.
And you alluded to a $1,000 fine. Can you explain what in the provision in the state statutes, if operator, a restaurant owner, operator, server, a package store owner, or a bar owner or server, what happens if they catch somebody with one of these red stripes on their license?
If they come in with a red stripe on their license to buy alcohol, the vendor can take that and give it to the ABC board. The ABC board levies a civil fine, and they send $1,000 to the business for taking that license. It's an incentive. When I was trying to get this law passed, the industry said, please don't make this mandatory, because if we happen to miss a license now and then, we don't want to be liable because we missed one. So we're going to do it. We're going to check all these IDs. We just don't want you to have that liability if we happen to miss one. Well, here we are several years down the road, and they're not checking every ID. In fact, several businesses have refused to check any IDs. So that was the reason for the incentive behind for the $1,000 was to incentivize businesses to check the IDs.
Well, I want to thank you for coming down. It's important to have the author, the person who drafted the original version of this red stripe license. Thank you very much, Mr. Crump.
Mr. Trainee.
Harry, thank you very much for being down here. Back in '95, I got a call from police department because my wife's car was wiped out at C Street in Fireweed by a drunk driver. Had it not been for the fact the woman wears a C-bar religiously, the mother of my children would have been dead. Mm-hmm. The man was drunk. He didn't have a single scratch on him.
Yeah.
We need to do something, and this is our way to deal with this issue, so I appreciate you coming down.
Thank you. This is the right thing to do and the time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, do you have a question? We are appreciative of that fact, Mr. Flynn. And if you do have a question, please say something. He heard you. He's smiling.
Madam Chair, my name is Darwin Bewer. Last name is B as in boy, I-W-E-R. I'm chairman of the board for Alaska State Char. I'm also a member of the Alaska Tourism Industry Association. the Anchorage Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, and Downtown Licensed Beverage Association. However, I'm only here to represent only myself as the owner of Darwin's Theory, a bar downtown. I only mention these affiliations since this proposed ordinance, and I understand now there's more than one ordinance now, affects a wide variety of Alaskans and Alaska businesses. So I'm only representing myself. I'm basing my testimony here on my 30 years of owning Darwin's Theory, being in the liquor business, and the public testimony that was held at the subcommittee of the Public Safety Committee about 3 weeks ago. This ordinance tries to address two problems. First, the red stripe, and we don't have to go into what a red stripe is anymore. Try to identify the court-ordered persons prohibited from purchasing alcohol. And secondly, it addresses, at least the final version, or the third version, is the prevention of underage persons from obtaining alcohol from licensed premises. You've already heard, and you're going to hear more, I'm sure, testimony in writing or in verbally of many persons on this ordinance. All that testimony will concern only two subjects. First, repeat drunken drivers are a problem. Well, everybody in this room knows drunken drivers are a problem. That's the repeat drunken drivers. That is the one that generally, and research has shown that it's those that have over a 0.16 blood alcohol content. You have heard, and you will hear again, tragic, tearful, heart-wrenching accounts of families devastated by repeat drunken drivers. And they are tragic. I'm not trying to demean that. In fact, when I was in college, I lost a dear friend to a drunk driver. Very traumatic. I understand that. ID checks, in this testimony at the subcommittee meeting, ID checks are full of loopholes and easily avoidable. It was just pointed out by former Representative Crawford that 4,000 approximately court-ordered red stripe licenses have been ordered, but only a little over 2,800 have been picked up. Therefore, these people know that if they don't even pick up their ID or their driver's license with a red stripe on it, they don't have it, they don't have to show it. There are thousands of IDs from the state, from the nation, and the world that are legal for proof of age in Anchorage or Alaska. Out of the over 200,000 adults of drinking age in Anchorage and 1 million tourists that we're expecting, there are only 486 red stripers that we are trying to identify. So, don't be seduced by the advisory vote on the ID checks was only for liquor stores. The vote did include other licensees. It didn't list electronic monitoring as an option. It was clearly a political crutch to lean on to point to that this is a problem. We already know there's a problem.
Can you summarize, sir? Your time's up.
Sorry. Okay, I have the answer here, Madam Chair. If you be with me just a moment. The answer to this problem is electronic monitoring. An ankle bracelet is attached to the repeat perpetrator. Sensors on that bracelet through the skin will be able to tell when alcohol is consumed. GPS technology tells where that person is. In summary then, I'll give you one perfect example. If you'll remember the Lori Phillips case, the lady that was driving drunk on Potter Flats, she didn't finish her rehab. She didn't have a license because it was revoked. She got alcohol from somebody we don't know where. She killed somebody. If she'd been wearing an ankle bracelet, GPS would have told her where she was. The sensor would have told she had been drinking alcohol. There could have been the APD would have been there in no time at all. When she was at the hairdresser, she would have been put in jail. There would not have been a fatality.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman has a question.
Mr. Darwin, thank you for your testimony. I appreciate you. I know you've been a very active participant at many meetings involving being a responsible retailer, and actually I find your establishment to be very well managed, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question to you is that, are there ever a time that you check ID at all from any of your patrons?
We just checked it constantly, yes, mainly because of the underage, but.
How about at the time of sale using a credit card or a check or any
We
other?
periodically do. We haven't done that, it hasn't been mandatory recently. We have not done that on every ID. But I know other businesses that have, the ones that have doormen. See, I don't have a doorman at my place. Sure. And so others such as the Rum Runners and Chilkoot's Charlie's, they've been checking mandatory IDs for years. They have not found, Rum Runners, for instance, has not found one red striper. In Brown Jug, 6 over the years that they've been doing this. The deal is, the red stripe can be avoided. There's all kinds of, a dozen of different types of IDs that are available for proof of age. I mean, if I had a red stripe on my license, I wouldn't show it. I'd show my, my passport or, something else, some of their military ID. There's all kinds, so you can get away. The point is, mandatory ID checking does not work. You said yourself, sir, that this is just another layer of bureaucratic, not effective way to try to find the red stripers. It's not effective.
I didn't quite go that far. I did say that it's another layer of trying to control persons who are irresponsible consumers of other
Okay,
products.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Sorry, sir, there are no other questions.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Kevin Smestad. It's S-M-E-S-T-A-D. I am the Northeast Community Council President. I am the Creekside Park PTA President. I'm the Begich Middle School PTA President. I'm the interim of the Eastside District, interim President of the Eastside District Plan that hasn't been approved through this assembly yet. And I do quite a lot of other activities for the community. And the reason I do these activities is because I feel strongly that Anchorage is a great town to live in. This is a wonderful place to live in, and I feel that my kids are not safe. I have 3 kids, and I do not feel they're safe in this town to go out and just play and go places. So I invest my time full-heartedly for this community to hopefully create a safer place. ID checks, I believe, mandatory for any type of purchase of alcohol, whether it's in restaurants, bars, or packaged liquor stores, should be a requirement for the state of Alaska. Should be a requirement for the whole entire world for me. I do have a question for you guys. Do you know for a fact I have a red stripe on my driver's license? Can you look at me and tell that straight to my eye right now? I don't believe anyone can, because I don't have my ID out in front of you to show you. I believe that we need teeth to a law that was passed, this red stripe law, that would help, and that teeth is checking ID. I also believe that checking ID just because for age is a good reason. I believe that checking ID for anything really is important. I believe alcohol is not something that is a requirement of society. I believe alcohol is something that we earn, that we have to become we have as citizens earned the right to purchase this. I feel that there's a lot of people out there that break the law and do not care, and we need to find some way. The beginning is this ID check, and I would really hope that this body would take a close look at that we need this. I'm here because I got 3 children, and I want them to grow up in a town that I don't have to be fearful of people driving on the street drunk. Period. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Bernadette Bradley, B-R-A-D-L-E-Y. I'm what you call a cradle restaurateur. I was born
in the restaurant industry with my parents having a liquor license. And as I get older, I see more and more government intrusion into something that I thought that I owned. But besides that, one thing that I would like for somebody to correct me on is when there was the last DUI fatality coming from a bar or restaurant in Anchorage. The last one I know of was May 2005, which is about the same time Anchorage Charge started the Off the Road program. The industry has been working tirelessly to get drunk drivers off the road. And we keep getting pounded by government saying it's just not good enough. I went to a convention up in Fairbanks, and there was a speaker from the American Beverage License Association who said the industry needs to find a way to identify problem drinkers, because it's a small percentage of drinkers that create all these laws for people that are responsible consumers. We reached out to Mr. Crawford and visited with his idea of the red stripe. And I have to say today is a disappointing day for me for a couple of politicians. Mr. Crawford was clear that he had no interest in making this mandatory. As he spoke about the red stripe, and people worried about liability if they don't check one, the liability is the same if I have somebody that leaves my establishment without a red stripe and kills an innocent person. I am responsible to that family, whether they have a red stripe or not. The liability argument holds no water with me. You talk about Costco's and showing ID or showing ID with in other businesses going to catch a plane. Those are already established. This is something new that I have to tell a single mother that's a server for me with 3 kids that she's got to slow her time taking orders and not making as much in tips. It will affect over a year's time how much she sells. I am not in business to harm anybody. I believe I'm a responsible licensee, and I was at a committee meeting for the public safety, if I can continue.
Just summarize if you could.
And Mr. Hahnemann was talking about tow truck issues and said that he always seeks the expertise of people in the industry. I invited him to come to the Bradley House and do 100% check ID. He said he would. I emailed him, I called him, I got no response. I don't think he has the expert viewpoint from the industry yet. Thank you.
He has been out of state.
Thank you. That's what I was going to respond back. I did get your messages, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to have been working around the clock down there as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Assembly members, my name is Matthew Kerr, K-E-R-R, and I'm a lifelong Anchorage resident. I've had experiences that give me a unique perspective on this law. I was born here when the drinking age was 19. I've traveled extensively through the former Iron Curtain countries. I regularly host dozens of foreign friends from my travels who visit Alaska and contribute to our economy. I've also had a former schoolmate killed by a drunk driver, and I myself have been a victim of a 5-time drunk driving offender who sent my passenger and friend into emergency neurosurgery. I've also watched another longtime friend with a postgraduate degree decline into what I will euphemistically call a mouthwash alcoholic. Nobody would dare call me sympathetic to alcoholism, but I oppose this law because it's ineffective and it's wrong. The Scarlet Letter did not stop the other driver, and it did not stop my friend. I support our local retailers using discretion to prevent sales to chronic inebriates, but I doubt the red stripe has stopped a single alcoholic from obtaining alcohol. I've seen what a serious alcoholic will do to get a drink. As soon as the word gets out on the street, it won't take long for serious alcoholics to panhandle enough money to get a U.S. passport or a state-issued identification card to complement their license in case it is ever given the red branding. As one of our local tavern owners has commented in the press, they haven't seen a single red stripe license because anyone who has one has simply found a way around it. Do we ban U.S. passports next, like one establishment that I'm aware of? On the other hand, this law inconveniences ourselves, our visitors, and even criminalizes completely innocent actions. Do you realize that you're actually proposing that a server earning a basic living wage should get a criminal record because he or she fails to ask Grandma and Grandpa Smith from Florida, who don't even drive, for their ID? Or that it criminalizes the bar owner who's on a first-name basis with a downtown resident who patronizes his business for a glass of wine on the walk home? Frankly, that offends me and defies common sense. On the contrary, I have frequently watched my obviously adult older friends be refused with their legitimate foreign identification and sometimes even U.S. passports. It's embarrassing to me to have to justify our paranoia and explain why we expect all foreigners to carry passports with them, while at the same time our own State Department usually recommends the exact opposite for us. I've been to countries where citizens are required to carry identification at all times, and I'm thankful that America is not like that. The irony is not lost on me that the only place where my ID is regularly checked is in my home state. Our current system is more than effective, and this is not the right way to combat chronic alcoholism. Quite simply, I oppose this law because it's a feel-good law that does nothing to fix the problem, but it makes criminals out of working people with good judgment and reasonable behavior. It makes my hometown less neighborly to myself and less welcoming to my friends, adds unnecessary government control, and makes us all a bit less free. I'm asking you to reject this ordinance and keep Anchorage the friendly, welcoming town that I grew up in.
Mr. Honeman has a question.
Mr. Kerr, thank you for your testimony. I appreciate your data and that your experiences through your life going throughout the country. I also grew up here when the drinking age was 19, and I also saw several friends and myself, in fact, experiment probably earlier than we should have. Admitting that. I had to admit that in my polygraph, by the way, from the department. I will say this. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the statistics, first of all, I appreciate you saying that you're pretty sure you're convinced that it won't work. But do you have a suggestion of some things or steps that would work?
Well, I understand that yes. I understand the two main goals of this legislation are to prevent, at the basic level, to prevent underage drinking, and then also to prevent chronic alcoholics or those who have court orders prohibiting them from consuming alcohol to do that. And as Mr. Birch has mentioned, there are newer types of electronic monitoring, which is not the same as the ankle bracelets that you may have heard of in the past that just require you to stay under house arrest. But in modern days, they do have the current alcohol or the current ankle bracelets, as was testified about before. They do actually record your coordinates, and that can be sent live to a dispatch center, which, for example, can say this category of people is not permitted if within these certain boundaries, be them bars or alcoholic licensees. And then there are other states, I believe California currently has a system like that in place. And once you set up those boundaries in the system, you can apply it to the entire group of people, and then the police are instantly notified as soon as that happens. And that's an example of something that focuses on the people that have the actual prohibition more than changing things and making things difficult for the rest of us. And then as far as underage drinking goes, there are already very hefty fees under the current legislation for any bar owner. We have sting operations that I think prove that people usually are complying with the law. And I can personally tell you, as someone who appears young, that the only time I'm not carded is if I am going to an establishment where I personally know the server or the bar owner or whoever I'm there to see. So I will say that it's not as if we're not being carded in the existing situation.
Would it surprise you to know that when we do liquor license renewals, that we get on occasion several responsible retailers who are actually caught serving underage and also in other violations of the laws. So they employ human beings. They miss things. I just wanted to point out a couple things. You showed some statistics. We've been averaging over 2,000 arrests per year for DUIs, just DUI, responsible drinking of alcohol. It's 5.4 a day on average. And also in the last 2 weeks, we've had 41 arrests. So 2 weeks, about 20 a week. That goes right around the average, 4 or 5 a day.
Oh, I absolutely support the concept of arresting people who are
steps, sir. It's
drunk.
One step. Thank you.
So, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, my name is Merle Akers. Last name is spelled Akers, and I've been in this town since a long time. I am down here tonight for one reason primarily only. We had an advisory vote, and that was clear as to what that was about. It was to check IDs at liquor stores. I am absolutely appalled that we have somebody here in this, our governing bodies have decided to expand that vote to include a whole bunch of other things. I heard before I came down here tonight, I listened to another gentleman saying, well, people surely meant to also include restaurants, bars, and other things when they did that. I will tell you that I did not do that. I voted for one thing. I will show you my ID when I buy a bottle at the liquor store. I do not want to be bothered with, nor will I be bothered with, taking out my wallet to show somebody ID in a restaurant before I can order a drink before supper. I take my wallet out one time. I go to the liquor store, take my wallet out, pay the guy. If he wants to see my ID, I will show it to him. When I go to a restaurant and I sit down for a meal, if they want to see my ID before I can get a drink, I will not order a drink. I will leave that restaurant. And I've done that already before. It already happened to me in one day. I remember it was in Texas someplace. The other thing that I point out to you, which happens to me a lot, probably not all of you do the same, but a lot of times when we go out to eat, my wife and I, oftentimes she doesn't even have her ID with her. Leaves her purse in the car. Doesn't take it. What are you supposed to do? Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to make a law that's going to make the IDs checkable at restaurants and wherever else you want, then get an advisory vote out and list those things down so people vote for it. So there's nobody coming in here and saying, we're interpreting this as being more than what it was, what the lettering on the words said on the advisory vote. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Duran Powell. I'm the general manager of Chilkoot Charlie's, and I would echo his sentiments. The gentleman that just spoke before me, it's common knowledge that we have a 100% ID check at Chilkoot's, but there are some exceptions to that, and they're reasonable exceptions. And it's when you have a guy that's going outside to smoke, we're not carting him 6 times a night as he comes back in the door. When a doorman is on, a doorman is doing that job, and in the daytime, we have a day bartender, and they may not card the 65-year-old man that's a regular customer. And we say we have a 100% ID check, but at nighttime when I have doorman working the door, I'll get a call on the radio, and I've got mom and pop from Michigan are at the front door, and the doormen are denying entry because they just got off the cruise ship and they don't have their ID with them. And I can clearly see that they're 65 years old. I'm allowed the leeway to make a reasonable decision and say, they're fine. They're not under 21. It's obvious. They probably have grandkids that are 21. That being said, the vote was for package stores. We have a huge debate ahead of us to talk about restaurants and bars, and we should have that debate. And we've done some research. There are 245 different forms of legal federal ID. 245. If you work for the FAA, if you work for the FBI, each agency has ID that people use. There are 50 state IDs, and there's hundreds of international passports. We have a thick Bible-sized book at the front door that shows where those IDs, and none of those IDs that are valid are going to have a red stripe on them. And it's one of the problems we had with the law when it first came out, is that it had huge holes in it. And now we're trying to fix these holes with the original proposition. I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if it's possible to fix this law, the red stripe law that we're trying to deal with.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Tony Jones. I'm here to speak to you as an individual tonight. If I needed to choose one version of the ordinance that's before you, it would be the least restrictive, which would be the version that would cover only package stores. I did vote yes on the question when it was on the ballot, and I thought it meant package stores only. But I'm not really here to speak in favor or against the ordinances so much as to offer just some general comments. I don't know how effective this ordinance is really going to be, or I ask myself that when we have such a small number of people that it applies to. Perhaps at the package store level it might, but when I think of restaurants and bars, I trust the servers and their judgment at a number of levels. First of all, my primary concern there is with young people slipping in and having a problem with underage drinkers. And I trust the servers carding for that. And I also trust the servers with the training they've received for watching for people that become inebriated. I'm inclined to let them do their job in that regard. And quite frankly, the burden is on the establishment, I believe, if they don't do their job. And I know that some businesses do provide rides home to people that, I think somebody testified to that effect. If it's my personal belief, if someone wants to drink, they're going to figure out a way to get alcohol and be out there, whether it's in the parks or on the roads. I happen to live very close to Taku Campbell Lake and the woods, and we have quite a bit of homeless, quite a few homeless encampments there. And so I do have some experience with that. And we have package store within walking distance of the lake. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you guys, too. Keep working.
Madam Chairman, members of the Assembly, Mayor Sullivan, my name is Randall Call, R-A-N-D-A-L-L-C-A-L-L. I am General Counsel and Vice President of Alyeska Resort. I had submitted a letter previously to this group, and I just want to make a couple points relative to that letter. Every one of the employees at Alyeska Resort who serves liquor is TAM certified, and we provide additional training to those servers. And the state governs the control of the sale of alcohol, and we comply with those state requirements. I think there's a legal question, and that may be the question that's raised, relative to whether the state has preempted this area anyway, and whether this ordinance will be enforceable through the mechanism that is currently proposed. That's one concern. We at Alyeska Resort obviously want to keep those who have had too much to drink out of the bars, not serve them, and not serve any underage patrons. And we take that very seriously. But we believe that this ordinance as currently drafted really transfers much of the responsibility to the businesses that should remain with the individual and with law enforcement. Specifically, we would support a ankle bracelet or some sort of higher technology to keep these people out of the bars and out of the restaurants. One point that hasn't been made is businesses who serve alcohol don't want these people in their establishments. We don't want them there. We don't want them to come in and try to buy alcohol, underage or those who have been restricted. But this ordinance, I don't think, gets there. Let me give you a couple real examples of how difficult this would be to enforce. At the Sitzmark Bar and Grill at the resort, we serve over 3,000 meals in a 2-day period. We have hundreds of people coming to that bar with the restaurant designation to buy a burger, buy a soft drink, buy a beer, and it essentially becomes impossible to card every one of those individuals. And we can't card them at the door, and even if someone had a restrictive license, all they would need to say to us is, I'm not coming on there to buy alcohol, I'm coming to buy a burger and a soft drink. And we couldn't keep them out of the establishment. The other point is in a banquet. We have a banquet of 300 people. What do we do if at that banquet they want to have a glass of wine and that's part of the banquet? We go around to each of those tables and ask the individual to pull out their ID. Finally, we have lots of tourists that come down, and it creates the same problem. We clearly support, and we do presently, card every individual who purchases at our package liquor store. We believe that we support that and find that reasonable enforcement to card every individual. We think that to expand it beyond that doesn't make sense, and that there are other and better alternatives.
Thank you, and we did receive your letter.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Leffel, L-E-F-F-E-L. I'm the Member Relations Director for Alaska Char. Of course, many of our members are seriously concerned about the impact that this will have on their businesses. When the package stores in Anchorage agreed to voluntarily check identification, I happened to witness on a couple of occasions law-abiding citizens being treated like criminals and being refused the sale of alcohol because they forgot to bring their ID. One in particular was a man who was clearly in his 50s, was buying a bottle of real nice champagne to have with his wife to celebrate their 25 years of marriage. Darn, forgot the ID. Can't buy the alcohol. There goes the surprise. He has to go back home, get his ID. Honey, what are you doing? What's all those flowers about? So it kind of ruined a good occasion. And, you know, law-abiding citizens. I witnessed another law-abiding citizen being refused service because the sale of alcohol because he didn't have his ID as well. And it does punish the people who pay taxes, who don't break laws, who are good community-minded people. The airport does 100% ID checking in all of their bars, and it's kind of a national thing as well. I asked a bartender who works at the airport, I said, well, do you ever get adverse reactions to that? I mean, you know, when you're carding grandma and grandpa, and, you know, did they get upset? And he goes, oh, yes, they want to rip your face off. That was his quote. So I've seen many angry customers. I've Googled fake IDs. We cover a lot of information on fake identification and how to watch for fake identification in our alcohol server education class. And so I thought, well, I wonder how easy it is to get a fake ID. So I Googled it. There's about 50 websites that offer fake or novelty identification. And in our alcohol server education classes, we teach servers how to watch out for those fake IDs that kids obtain to try to buy alcohol. Oftentimes, they're really, really hard to catch. And it takes a very trained eye to catch these fake IDs. They're easy to get. People with alcohol-restricted IDs can easily get another form of ID. To wrap it up, why pass an ordinance that's not going to be effective and is just going to treat law-abiding citizens like criminals?
Thank you. Mr. Honeman has a question.
A comment, actually, to one time I went to my bank, who I contacted the same clerk probably 2 or 3 times, and I forgot my ID and my license. They wouldn't give me my money out of the bank where I put my money in. So that was one interest. The other thing is that I'm wondering if those people drove, which would also put them in another violation of driving without their license on their person. So
I think if you drive without your license and you know your license number, can't you give the officer your license number and have a fix-it ticket?
you could get it. You still get a ticket.
You get a fix-it ticket, though, right?
Not a fix-it ticket. That's up to court.
Oh,
Ticket.
okay.
It's points in your license. So.
Yeah, people do forget their license quite a bit.
But thank you for your
Okay.
training and
Thanks.
for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Valerie Honeman. The last name is Honeman. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm in support of the original ordinance with 100% ID check. On May 13, 1982, a vehicle driven by my grandfather carrying my 31-year-old sister and taking her to the hospital was struck by a drunk driver. And she was in labor. She was killed instantly, as was my nephew, my unborn nephew. My grandfather was severely injured. We lost him a short time later. I have witnessed the devastation of alcohol with the loss of my sister, and I have witnessed my siblings struggle with alcoholism throughout their life. I don't blame alcohol or the industry. Certainly that's a decision that my siblings and the driver of that vehicle made to drink, to do what they've done. That's their decision. They bear that responsibility. But I think that those of you in a position to make a decision bear responsibility to put mechanisms in place that aren't going to be 100% answer. They aren't going to solve everything. I don't know that there's anything out there that really would solve it, because as soon as you find something, there's always somebody trying to find a way to defeat it. But I think that you need to put mechanisms in place. I like the concept of maybe at some point down the road using the technology to be able to do things that maybe some might consider a little less intrusive, but how long would it take to put those in place, and what can you put in place now? I'm in support of it 100% checking. I've heard it said many times, you go to the airport to travel, you have to show your ID. I'm a federal employee. Every day I go into work to the same building that I have worked in since 1982. I have probably worked there longer than any of the security guards that are there. And yet I show my ID every day when I go into work. So it's just not, in my opinion, it's not overly intrusive. Just this morning we went to breakfast. I didn't feel like bringing my purse. I tucked my ID into my wallet, into my jacket. I had it available. So I think there are ways to work around it. I don't think that it's 100% resolution. I remember the outcry when the smoking ordinance went into place and how everybody thought that businesses were going to not be able to, people were going to quit coming to their businesses. They continued to come. They're packed. Moose's Tooth, you can't get in there, without an hour-long wait, 2-hour wait sometimes. So change is hard, but I think we need to look at the things that are for the better of the good of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Billy Ray Powers, Powers. Land of the Free. Does that ring a bell? Ever creeping, insidious government encroachment. If this is a really good law, and you're really strong about it, maybe you can think of 2 laws you can take away in order to pursue this one. The red stripe is a complete joke. It was a waste of our time and our money. Ineffective, as everybody stated tonight. 200,000 citizens here have to be jerked around because we got some red stripe licenses out there, about 500 of them. I don't think so. Like I say, insidious, ever-creeping government encroachment. I don't care how they do it in Tennessee or Baton Rouge or Indiana. This is Alaska. And this is where a lot of people come because they enjoy the last frontier and freedoms here. If this was effective at keeping drunks off the road, then I would be for it, but it's not. It's not effective. If we can come up with something that is, I will be 100% for it, because it is a problem. But bothering people in bars, bothering the grandma that steps into a liquor store to get a can of cheap beer to make beer battered halibut, I don't think we need to bother her. I don't think we need to bother any member of this panel for an ID. You guys all look good to me. Every one of you. Every one of you look okay to me. I don't think we're going to have a problem. And if you know somebody, you know them for 20 years, do you have to ID them? I don't think so. Do we need a bunch of cops? Maybe we need some expensive undercover cops to go around and eat in our establishments to do a sting, you know what I'm saying? That would be good duty. In fact, a lot of OT probably on that job. I guess I don't have anything more to say. That's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Anyone else would like to testify? Go ahead, Mr. Flynn. You got Mr. Flynn.
Flynn want to speak to me?
He wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick.
Mr. Honeman?
I'd like to, Madam Chair, I'd like to move to continue this ordinance to the meeting of May 24th, but before I make that, need to check with Mr. Wheeler. I know that there's a recent legal opinion. Do you believe that we'd be able to work out any issues that, so that this could be on the ballot, in the agenda for the May 24th? And perhaps Ms. Tucker might be able to also answer.
Through the chair, Mr. Honeman, we were asked to look at this issue yesterday morning, and we provided to the chair our preliminary concerns. We're hoping to distill it down into a formal opinion for the Assembly as quickly as we can. That said, the Assembly Council will be looking at the same issues as I understand it. We may or may not agree on what the legal position should be for the municipality, and at that point, the Assembly will have to decide where it wants to go from there.
If we schedule this for the meeting of May 24th, would that be enough time to get Ms. Tucker?
Chair, yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to move this matter and continue to May 24th.
Second.
Is there any objection?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
Sorry, I don't know if now is the appropriate time, but I did want to respond to one comment regarding the Municipal Prosecutor's Office. I could do it now.
Well, just wait until we decide on the hearing, on the date. Is there objection to that date? Mr. Trainee, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Wheeler, I would like that in writing to this body, please, so we can check with those jurisdictions.
Okay. I assumed that it was going to come in writing. Is that correct, Mr. Wheeler? All right. Is there objection to that date? I do want to share with you that the 24th is making me very nervous. It's very full right now. But we'll do the best we can and maybe move some things when we get closer. Now, Mr. Wheeler, do you want to weigh in on something else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the persons that testified, I think it was Mr. Crawford, mentioned that the difference between Fairbanks and Anchorage was due to the Municipal Prosecutor's Office. I would like to point out that, number one, we do not handle felony cases. We only handle the first and second DUIs. So we don't have occasion to handle a lot of the higher-end cases, if you will, in terms of repeat offenders and chronic inebriates. Number two, because there is no mandatory ID check, the imposition of the license restriction doesn't have any teeth to it, so we don't, in effect, spend a lot of time looking at that issue. We focus on requiring alcohol treatment programs and the like, including interlock devices on the vehicles. Number three, we have found that the number one problem we have with persons convicted is getting them relicensed. So if they're not bothering to even get the licenses, getting the red stripe makes no difference.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Starr.
At this point of order, the matter's been postponed, so there's nothing to speak of.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to the next item on our
Madam Chair, I'd
agenda.
like to change the order of the day to take up 14G.
Second.
It's just an appropriation matter of $4.5 million, and Director Merrill Field's waiting patiently, and he should probably
Okay.
be able to.
Let's see if there's objection. Is
Thank
there
you.
objection to doing that? Seeing no objection, then the first item will be 14G. This is an item regarding an appropriation for $4,750,000 from the FAA.
Waive reading.
Thank you. If you'd like to speak to Merrill Field capital improvements, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
That item is before us. Mr. Starr, anything?
Nope, just urge approval.
Seeing no one in queue, please vote. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
And Ms. Drummond? That item passes 10-0. Thank you very much. We're now at 14A. This is an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $29 million in aggregate bonds.
Waive reading.
Okay, thank you. This is road and drainage bonds. Anybody like to speak to it? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 14B. This is issuance of not to exceed $5 million in aggregate principal amount of general obligation school bonds. Anyone like to speak to this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 14C. This is an ordinance amending the zoning map and providing for rezoning of approximately 46.6 acres from PCSL to R1SL for the northeast.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This is basically rezoning some property north of Eagle River Loop and east of Yosemite Drive. If anybody would like to speak to this, please come forward.
Madam Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is Jim Sawhill. I'm with Lounsbury and Associates, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant, the Mental Health Trust Land Office in the application before us tonight. The request we have before us is to rezone the property into two different zones. The first is a 27-acre R1SL special limitation zone and a 19.6 acres of PLI-SL. And the special limitations on the R1 is to limit the number of dwelling units within the area to 97 dwelling units, which is 3.6 dwelling units per acre, which is similar to an R1A zoning density. So we wanted to agree to that. Excuse me. And there's a couple points I wanted to make tonight. First is this rezone application conforms with the Eagle River Comprehensive Plan. And the Eagle River Comprehensive Plan designates this area as residential with 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre, and then a portion of the property is indicated as special study. The special study area is the old Eagle River landfill that is on part of the property, and we completed some special studies and determined that that area really wasn't suitable for development, and therefore we're proposing it as open space or parklands in this rezone application tonight. We did meet with the Community Council on 3 occasions to present the project and discuss issues with them. One of their concerns was R1 or R1A zoning, which would be appropriate at this location. It was our initial application to apply for an R1, and based on the input from the Community Council, we agreed to limit the density to address their concern over the density on this site and its impacts to Yosemite Drive and the schools in the area. So we tried to reach common ground on that. We also heard information from the community. They were concerned about traffic and drainage issues, and we will be dealing with those issues. When we come into basically come with a formal replat of the property, we'll be required to provide a traffic impact analysis and a comprehensive drainage study, and we feel it's appropriate to deal with those issues at that time, and don't see anything in our any things that will cause us to not be able to deal with those issues. This project, the rezone for this project originally came forward as a result of the initial work that we want to do there. We currently have the Trust Land Office has an authority through a conditional use to excavate about 80,000 cubic yards of material in the UMed district at 40th and Laurel. So we have that permit, and it has been through planning and zoning. And we want to take that 80,000 cubic yards of material and bring it and place it in the PLI zoned land that's going to be here. And through that, we'll take that waste material, save money for the trust, place it here, and prepare that area for ball fields potentially, and enhance that open space. We want to take waste and convert it into amenity for this subdivision in this area. And so we think that is a win, and we need this rezone tonight to be able to make that happen. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure we'll have some.
Mr. Honeman.
Yes, just curious, have you been before the community council in that area? Has there been any formal resolutions or anything from the community council?
For the university district?
For this area?
For this area? Yes, we went to that community council. There was not a formal resolution, but they did provide a letter that's in the packet here to the Planning and Zoning Commission outlining their concerns. And again, their concerns were they would prefer an R1A zoning, and so we came up with the compromise there. There was suggestion on some buffers that be provided, and we kind of discussed that issue with Planning and Zoning Commission, and they decided not to provide any requirements for buffers at this time. To take that issue up at the platting would be the appropriate time.
Yeah. And I did read that. I just want to make sure see if you had any follow-up conversations or compromise. So I'm glad to hear that. So you're attempting to be a pretty good neighbor within the community.
We're trying.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all right now.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Larry Wiggett, W-I-G-E-T, and with me this evening also to answer questions is Jose Vincenti, the developer of the Eagle Point subdivision and also a member of the Eagle Point Homeowners Association Board, of which I'm here to represent. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the issues of concern to our association. Our association has two concerns regarding the proposed rezoning, which is now before you. The first is the ability to provide for future connectivity from Eagle River Road to the Mental Health Land Trust lands and neighboring parcels of land. The Eagle Point Homeowners Association requests that the approval of the rezoning be deferred until the Mental Health Lands Trust addresses the future road access to its parcels of land and neighboring parcels of land from Eagle River Loop Road. These parcels of land are presently served only by one road, Yosemite Drive, a road that serves not only the Eagle Point subdivision, but also Eagle River Area High School, a municipal-owned parcel of land and recreational land. With an estimated area of over 300 acres, connectivity to these parcels of land is critical. We are also concerned that some of the proposed landfill that is scheduled to get underway shortly may conflict with and prevent the necessary road access from being achieved. In addition, road access from Eagle River Loop Road should provide reasonable access to a future parking lot that will be needed when the Eagle River Area High School is eventually expanded to house 1,600 students versus the 800 students it presently accommodates. The school common facilities were designed and constructed to accommodate 1,600 students, but I believe the parking lot was not. It is also my understanding that there were extensive discussions with local property owners before I became a member of that area by the state Alaska Department of Transportation to provide for a road to serve this area when planning and designing of the Eagle River Loop Road was done in the 1980s. Those provisions are reflected in the right-of-way plans of the Eagle River Loop Road. The MOA Planning Department has copies of these. Our second concern is in regards to the residential density of the area resulting from the proposed rezoning to R1A. The Planning and Rezoning Commission approved the rezoning of 27 acres of this land to R1, with a special limitation stating that no more than 97 lots could be created in that parcel of land. That special limitation represents a residential density of 3.6 lots per acre. In this manner, if the parcel of land, our association feels that the special limitation should read that the R1 parcel of land available for residential development should have a residential density of no more than 3.6 lots per acre. In this manner, if the parcel of land in question is developed in its entirety as a single-family residential subdivision, the land could be subdivided into the 97 lots. If, however, an access road and portion of these lands must be purchased to accommodate additional high school parking, then the remaining parcel of land should be developed in the same density of 3.6 per acre. In conclusion, first, the Eagle Point Subdivision Homeowners Association again respectfully requests that the rezoning of the parcel of land referred to here be deferred until the road access connectivity from Eagle River Loop Road be addressed by the Mental Health Land Trust, and its proposal is reviewed and approved by the Municipality of Anchorage Project Management and Engineering and Planning Department. And second, we feel that the Homeowners Association feels that the special limitation of the rezoning of the 27 acres to R1 should follow the intent of the Planning and Zoning Commission when it approved the rezoning, stating that the R1 available for development should be residential density of no more than 3.6 per acre. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. No questions. Jose, do you want to speak? No? Anyone else? Hearing and seeing no one else, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
That item is before us.
Pleased to actually have this come in front of us. It's starting to establish some land trends in a growing area of our town. And I think it's appropriate for us. What we do here is the Assembly, of course, has managed the rezone requests. That's a power that we hold highly here. What I'm also cognizant of, having served on Planning and Zoning Commission, is the level of detail that goes into the review prior to what we get. It encompasses all of the community council concerns. It does a longer term viewpoint discussion multiple times. You understand the developer went in front of the community council 3 different times. The Planning and Zoning Commission vets things out with more supportive staff. I know Mr. Weaver's here, but I was pretty impressed in my time that I served on the body how detailed and how focused it was to the public process. From here, the platting of the property and the actual design of the development will take many, many steps as well. Some would call it bureaucracy, and this is also some of my angst with the amount of bureaucracy and the obstacles we put in front of the development process, and it's a wonder that anybody can afford to do it. So without a lot of ado, and I guess there are some amendments to be discussed, but quite frankly, I'm less favorable to those at this point and would just urge approval as the Planning and Zoning Commission has brought it to us. So that's my take.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move 2 amendments to this ordinance. First amendment is in Section 3, is amended to read as follows on page 1 at lines 33 and 36 to add an additional special limitation. That would be item B, which would state, prior to any development, a comprehensive drainage impact analysis shall be reviewed and approved by the Community Development Department.
Second. This is awkward. I can't second it.
I'll second. Second.
Can I just, I'm sorry. That's all right. I'm happy with him taking it the rest of the issue. I'll weigh in here if I can. Can you see the screen?
Ms. Osiander.
This rezone has been discussed intensively for probably 2 years, first in concept and now more specifically. There remains concern from South Fork Community Council, and I discussed some of the concern with the Planning Department, Mr. Weaver in particular, to come up with these amendments. there's fear that when this fill gets put in on the landfill area, which is that sort of a flat, light brown in the underneath the hill, that the drainage off the alternative drainage off the high school could get backed up, and there's also some concern that potentially a secondary access road could be impacted by the additional drainage. This First Amendment basically ensures that that's looked at real carefully, and frankly, Mr. Starr is right. It will be looked at in the platting process, but to have it here, I think, is a reassurance to the community that people are very aware of it. We just spent over $200,000 for a drainage study to USKH for this whole area, so it seems reasonable that we pay particular attention. That's the rationale for the First Amendment.
Mr. Honeman.
Well, I'm appreciative of the amendment. I believe I'd support that one. My question, I guess, goes back to the Homeowners Association's concern about having access from the Eagle River Loop Road. And I'm looking on the map, and I look on the map that I'm seeing up here, and I'm not sure where it would jive. But is there anybody that can answer that question, I guess, from either Mr. Weaver or someone can answer? Has that been something that's been addressed, looked at, or is that an option, plausible option?
Mr. Weaver?
It's a fairly large parcel, and I guess my concern is ingress and egress out of that area.
Madam Chairman, members of the Assembly, it has been looked at. Yosemite is a collector on the USNHP, can carry 2 to 10,000 trips a day, and presently with subdivision in existence and the 800 students at the high school generates about 4,000 trips a day. So the street, when fully constructed, will be able to handle that additional traffic with the subdivision.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
No, do you want to? I don't have anything else with that amendment. Do you want to?
I'm in the queue.
Mr. Starr.
To the amendment, I'm a little challenged because what we're going to do is we're going to probably re-engage the developer to incur some more costs for basically a prove up on the drainage study. And it's, you know, those that represent the area have seen the drainage study that's done there. The water, the rerouting of the water, Ms. Osiander, that you speak about is only allowed to go on the Mental Health Trust land because the Mental Health Trust landowners have allowed it to happen. Basically, the school district's encroaching on the land, and I think that they've to minimize the flooding to the downstream development at the Yosemite Drive, Eagle Crossing, or Eagle Point, I should say. Mental Health Trust said, hey, go ahead and run that pipe, run that overflow drainage to our site. They did that because they thought it was neighborly. They didn't do it because they had to. And now we're basically going back to this developer saying, well, we're going to take that pipe away. We're going to move drainage water from Eagle River High School. You know, prove to us that you're not going to develop it. That to me goes wrong. We've seen the development designs from the drainage study out over towards the HLB lands, and then the school district's water problems will be encompassed with all of that. I think, again, this is a burdensome requirement that puts a unnecessary cost as well as a time delay on somebody that basically will be proving up on all of that when they plat the development, when they design the roads and the drainage systems that will come forth. So I think it's a delay item that doesn't need to make sense, and it's going to cost the developer.
You want to vote?
Yes. Vote, please.
No.
That amendment fails. Do you have another amendment, Ms. Osiander?
I do, sir. Amendment number 2 is to Section 4 to be amended at page 2 after line 18 to add an additional special limitation related to excavation and fill. Basically to add the underlined words in the handout. It says prior to any fill or excavation on the property within the district, a truck access and hauling plan shall be reviewed and approved by the traffic engineer to minimize impacts at peak AM and PM traffic.
Second. Horniman, second.
The rationale for this is twofold. The top capital project concern of South Fork Community Council, at least at the last meeting where they hadn't really finalized it, was when traffic goes out the loop road and turns to get onto the Glen in the morning, you have to come to a complete stop at the landfill and then turn, and traffic really backs up. There's a significant concern about I think it's about 4,000 trucks that will be carrying fill into this area on that road. Again, Mr. Starr will probably bring up the point that we're going to be looking at this anyway, but considering all the discussion we've had about Yosemite Road and the impacts of Yosemite Road on the high school traffic and the standard for Yosemite Road, it seems to me to be a strong reassurance to the community that this will be looked at closely, and so I urge approval for the amendment.
Mr. Starr.
Well, rarely do you see Debbie and I spiritedly debate an issue, but again, I think this is going to delay the development from the requirement that it's going to force the developer to sort of lay out their zones and talk about the excavation and the infill requirements well before a plat or a plan of the development has actually been approved. So in certain cases, they don't even know where the dirt's going to go yet. I mean, we're putting a burden requirement to them in a rezone action, remind you that we're rezoning here. We're telling them now they have to prove up onto us as to how many trips a day they anticipate, how much material they anticipate per the phasing schedule. And to me, that's all part of the planning and excavation permit requirement when they come through there. That's a very, very detailed requirement that the city makes us go through with water truck requirements, with time of day transits, and again, to have them do it ahead of time, the requirement that they bring a plan forward, I think is a little bit out of sequence, and I think we need to move the rezone and let the rest of the city processes work on the platting of that. So again, I'm not in support of modifying the planning and zoning summary.
Mr. Horniman.
I think I'm not as concerned about the first one as I am about this one here. And I mean, we're just working on the University area with the 40th Avenue and the Providence Hospital extensions and all the construction going on around there and the neighboring concerns. And I think Ms. Elsiander explained it very well about the Yosemite Drive concerns. And I have no problem. I don't really believe this will be an extra burden on the developer to think ahead a little ahead and make them do a little homework up front. Thank you. I'd urge support.
Vote, please.
No.
That motion passes. We're back to the original motion.
One last comment, if I could, sir, and that is the outstanding issue that still remains to be addressed came up in testimony. We currently in our building code have a blanket requirement that says you have to provide secondary access when you have more than 30 roads on a street. And if you look at this area, you don't have a very complete map there. It's bounded by Eagle River itself, the Loop Road, which by DOT is considered an expressway, and they're not allowing any other linkage, and Yosemite Road. There is no real other way to go to get into this whole area, which has a very nice subdivision, a high school, and now potentially another development with 97 homes, with one way in and one way out. And I firmly believe that we need to be flexible in situations like this. If we are literal in our requirements that secondary access is always required, we're precluding development in Eagle River, in Eklutna Valley, on Highland Road, and in many other parts of the municipality. It's not being addressed here. I did have pretty extensive conversation with several people about how this property can be developed without that secondary access. And there are some options, but the overriding concern, I think, is going to have to be addressed when we deal with the building code later, is to give some flexibility for secondary access. This project, I think, is fairly well designed, though there is community opposition to it. I urge support. We're just going to be watching them real closely.
Mr. Trombley.
Debbie, the question is about the secondary access. From my understanding is that there are exemptions for secondary access, such as geographical reasons. Is there any geographical reason as to why there couldn't be secondary access as far as existing infrastructure, in any of the above? I know that there are some exceptions to that rule.
That's a debate that I think we will absolutely have as we deal with the building code. In some cases, I think the city is interpreting this very literally and not giving exemptions when they're warranted. I absolutely believe that. And if we don't apply the common sense reason, we're shutting down development in this town. I think this is a really high priority issue that needs to be resolved.
Sure.
I've already submitted some potential amendments to the city administration in hopes that they'll look at this more closely, but it's a problem.
Okay, we're going to vote on the motion as amended, the original motion as amended. Vote, please.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you. The next item before us is item 14D, AO58. It's an ordinance authorizing a non-exclusive 30-foot radii landscape easement within Tract A, Block 6, College Gate.
Waive reading.
Thank you. If you'd like to speak to this landscape easement, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move approval. Second.
Is there discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please vote. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 14E, AR 118, a resolution appropriating $135,000 in the form of a reimbursable
Waive
grant.
reading.
This is for youth employment in the Parks program. If you'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve. Or second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 14F, AR 123, a resolution providing for the appropriation of donations of $177,252 to the Anchorage Public Library. If you'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in queue for discussion, please vote. Whoops. The screen jumped ahead of me. Hold on. I can't do it up here, Barbara. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. You can't show it up there? Is that all right that I've just announced it? All right. Next item before us, we already dealt with 14G. 14H is AR 125. It's a resolution appropriating $3,096,782 of area-wide general fund balance to the Real Estate Department 2011 operating budget.
Waive reading.
Excuse me. This is for repayment of a loan to MLNP, remediation of Reeve Boulevard, and remediation of Kincaid Park, to the tune of a little over $3 million. If anybody would like to speak to this, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Mr. Starr? Oh, I'm sorry. You did need a motion. You're right, Mr. Rodeman. Thank you. And that was seconded by Mr. Starr. Mr. Starr, would you like to speak to it?
Mr. Rod is not here. Perhaps the mayor can speak to this. I've been sort of abreast on the Kincaid project over there and some of these others. We appropriated money at first quarter budget reviews. Are we still pretty sure that this is going to do it? And two questions for you is, are you pretty sure that this is the budget And what if it goes over? What do we do? Use fund balance?
Yeah, that is correct. We have a pretty good estimate. We feel solid with it, but if we do go over, and, a lot of projects, you might encounter something once you start doing the work, but this should be pretty close, and if not, you're right, we go to fund balance.
And we're still going to pursue some legal remedy for the Reeve Boulevard one, is what I understand.
Yeah, on both projects, there's actually legal discussions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Honam?
Yes, I'm told that perhaps the state legislature or Senate passed a capital budget tonight. I'm just still, as a reminder, that I believe there was a request for monies from the state reference this repayment of the loan of the purchase of MLP land. So I'm hopeful that that comes through and it passes through and that we can reinvest this money back in our fund balance. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, please vote.
Yes.
That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 14I, AR 126, resolution appropriating $136,393 from the State of Alaska DOT.
Waive reading.
This is for the AMATS Traffic Counts Program. If you'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
I'm waiting for...
Second.
Thank you. Seeing no one in queue. Wait, could you hit the screen again, Mr. Hall? There we go. Seeing no one in queue, please vote.
Yes.
I don't have a screen to vote on.
How do you vote verbally then, Miss? You got her? Okay, that passes 10-0. Thank you. The next item before us is 14J. This is AR 127, a resolution appropriating $1,710,000 from the Public Works Department.
Waive reading.
To purchase replacement vehicles and equipment. If you'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in queue, please vote. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
And that item also passes 10-0. Thank you. With that, we've gotten through the agenda. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to us on any other matter that's not
Madam Chair?
Oh, I'm so, Ms. Gray Jackson, I just talked to you about it and I forgot again. I apologize. Ms. Gray Jackson.
I'd like to move to approve item 9, Apple 3.
Second.
And unfortunately, the students and their chaperones were trying to make it here and obviously didn't. And they're from Accutan, and so they won't be around when we have our next meeting. So, Madam Chair, I'd just like to read the resolution into the record and then distribute copies of the resolution
Ms. Gray
to them.
Jackson, before you do that, is there any opposition? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Go ahead, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly welcoming Accutan students, educators, and Traditional Council President Zhenya Borinen and applauding Accutan's investment in youth. Whereas the city of Accutan is located on Accutan Island in the eastern Aleutians, 35 miles east of Unalaska and 776 miles southwest of Anchorage. And whereas on May 1st, 2011, the 7 elementary and high school students named below embarked with Zhenya Borinen, Accutan Traditional Council President, and educators Arthur Woodard and Don Woodard to observe and experience fisheries science, Trident Seafood corporate operations, and local government and operations in Seattle and Anchorage. And whereas, in addition to many other experiences, this Accutan delegation of 10 has taken in the USGS Western Fisheries Research Labs, the NOAA Northwest Fisheries Science Center, the NOAA Aquaculture Project, the Alaska Fisheries Science Center, the Pacific Science Center, Trident Seafood Seattle offices, Seattle's West Police Precinct, and an Aleut Corporation shareholders informational meeting. And whereas, as part of their enrichment study program, these Accutan students are attending the May 10th, 2011 meeting of their Anchorage Municipal Assembly. They tried. Sarah Buriskin, age 16, Janine Borwanen, age 15, Anthony Shangen, age 14, Tom Nick Sherpanoff, age 13, Anisha Kudrin, age 13, Shaylin Garner, age 11, David Garner, age 9. Now and therefore, the Anchorage Assembly hereby extends a warm welcome to these residents of Accutan and applauds the educators and leaders of Accutan for their investment in youth and recognition that direct personal connection with the corporate research and government processes that shape our lives will also benefit our future. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly, the 10th day of May 2011. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. At this point on the agenda, if there's anyone who'd like to speak to us, now's the time. Hearing and seeing no one, we're at Assembly comments. Ms. Drummond, anything?
Nothing, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Nothing, ma'am.
Mr. Honeman?
Welcome to the students and staff from Accutan.
Thank you. Mr. Gray Jackson?
Oh, in case anybody doesn't know, at 7:30, the Senate passed the capital budget, and there's a House Finance Committee meeting scheduled for 1:30 tomorrow. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Mr. Hall?
No comment.
Mr. Starr?
Nothing.
Mr. Trombley?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Birch?
No comment.
Mr. Flynn? I think we've lost Mr. Flynn. Good night,
Move
Mr.
to adjourn.
Flynn.
Move to adjourn.
Seeing no objection, we're adjourned.